feature presentation.
What's up, everybody? Welcome to episode 103 of the Untitled Movie Podcast. I am one of your hosts, Matt Rohrbeck, alongside, he's allergic to tomatoes, but he is tomato meter approved, Eric Marchin.
Matt, Tiff
We're
is
back,
in the books
baby.
for this year. We're done. We made it through. We got through this. We took a week off. We normally do these now weekly.
2 weeks off, I believe. Yeah.
But we were still, releasing a lot of reviews throughout those 2 weeks. Everything from Tiff content to Star Wars got to be on brand a little bit there.
Yeah.
But now that we're finished another festival season, it's nice to kind of just take a little bit of a deep breath and maybe reminisce a little bit. Not get nostalgic for something that only just happened, but
like
just
a week ago, yeah.
Go back and look at what we liked the most of the festival, what some stuff that we saw that we didn't necessarily review individually on the Untitled Movie reviews section of our show, or on YouTube if you're watching it that way. We keep making the joke, and we probably will even closer to the film's release, but that Dune review.
No, we'll talk about it a little bit today. Yeah, like as Eric mentioned, this will be kind of our TIFF 21 wrap-up show. So we took a couple weeks off the main show to focus on just reviews. Last week we kind of just took off in general. We caught up with some stuff on in the theatrical stuff, which we'll talk about on this show, and maybe we'll do an individual review, because I do want to talk about Malignant a little bit. But we caught up with Cry Macho, Malignant. We kind of just took it easy last week. So but we're back to our weekly schedule. This episode will cover kind of TIFF as a whole, like Eric mentioned, some movies that either Eric only saw or I only saw, or some stuff we haven't necessarily. We might still do individual reviews for Bergman Island, Seven Prisoners, a couple other stragglers will pop out for TIFF reviews, but
they could just be regular reviews at this point, because Bergman Island is coming out on October 15th, and then,
so that'll just be a regular review.
Yeah. And then Seven Prisoners, even though it doesn't have a date yet, is supposed to come out in November.
So we might hold those for them. That might make more sense for those movies anyway.
Yeah.
To kind of talk about them as they're coming out. So they'll come. But today, TIFF. We'll talk about Nolan going to Universal. We're talking about that Super Mario Brothers movie cast, because that sent me on a ride. It's all I could think about all weekend.
Even
as
more
well
so than
as
the Last of Us photo that was released yesterday.
Which is just the back of their heads, but I'm all in, baby. We'll kind of touch on that, as well as the big Netflix TUDUM event this weekend, which not necessarily a lot of news, but they dropped a lot of different trailers and stuff that we'll talk about. But Eric, we're rested. Did you get up to much last week, or you just kind of... We did watch Malignant and Cry Macho together.
Yes, which I think was the highlight of last week, in terms of doing something that's a little bit of a palate cleanser from the festival circuit. Although I will say, and we were talking about this with Malignant, that would have been a perfect Midnight Madness movie.
Which... Peter did unofficially do a Midnight Madness screening of it on the last Saturday of TIFF. So,
and it's just a shame that Warner Brothers kind of dumped that movie, because in thinking about it after having watched it, it's not only, in my opinion, James Wan's best film, because it's taking the piss out of his own sort of creative style, but also, to me, it's not as good as it, but it reminded me a lot of Gremlins 2, where there is this satirical element to, again, the filmmaking, the genre itself, but it's also having a lot of fun and inviting you to have that fun with it. Which I was really surprised, because James Wan, for me, is somebody that I respect for what he's doing, but I don't necessarily think a lot of his films necessarily kind of work. But I know a lot of people, a lot of people love the Conjuring movies, obviously, and the Saw films and what have you.
I'm a Saw boy.
Whether it be ironically or not. But with Malignant, it kind of felt like that this culmination of his entire career, like even the early 2000s style that he's going with, but also on top of that, just like sort of the references of Saw and Insidious and The Conjuring within
It
the
all feels
film.
very intentional, right? Like, and
Yes.
I feel like you gotta buy into that movie right away, and you kind of have to know what he's doing or what he's going for. Because I've talked to other people, our friend Mike Muntz and a couple other people who, if you go in expecting The Conjuring or a pure just classic kind of jump scare kind of horror movie, that's absolutely not what you're getting. And it is a horror comedy. I think it is a horror satire, and I completely agree with you, Eric, where you can kind of see all the references to all of the other horror stuff he's done. And he's kind of like, you put it in perfect terms, taking the piss out of it and kind of poking fun at all of that stuff. And I feel like, while also, still being a fun, ridiculous, like horror action movie with comedic elements. And I think like the bad acting is intentional, the melodrama is intentional. Like I think all of that, like there's many shots in that movie where I'm like, that looks like something right out of Saw, but just a little elevated because it's not, as cheap as it was back then. And I really think that you mentioned all the other references that, like, I love that movie, and I keep thinking about it, and it's crept its way up my best of the year rankings. And I feel like it's best going in not knowing anything, but also knowing that it is a satire. I think like you
It's
have to go
scary
kind
soap
of,
opera, like that's
yeah,
kind of what it is. And it kind of feels like, again, going to your point of melodrama, it has this artifice, this facade that all of it kind of does feel fake or removed from, a more sort of integrated, straightforward horror movie. And that's kind of the fun of the film, right? Like even the sets of the main house where you have these over, head shots of characters running through the house, which are beautifully
yeah, like,
crafted and well done, but the cinematography and the score, you can tell, are very much taking sort of a nod, or sort of taking the same path that someone like Sam Raimi would in terms of the filming style. Like it's as much sort of
yeah.
Three Stooges as it is, kind of your classic grindhouse kind of horror movie.
Yeah, no, it's so much fun. And I think maybe we'll do maybe a spoiler cast or maybe not, but like just this small little chat. But unfortunately it came out right during the festival, and I would have loved, loved, loved if it played Midnight Madness. Like if it was just bumped one more week, right? And then could have played. I know Peter had a limited amount of spots, and I still think that that screening he probably introed on the Saturday night where he got a lot of the Midnight Madness fans to buy tickets to would have been a lot of fun. But that is a movie, if you see it with the right audience, I think you would have a blast with it. But I feel like if you just go to your multiplex at a random time, there's going to be some people that don't know what they're getting into and are not going to like that movie for it. But
Especially if you just want a
um,
traditional jump scare Friday night fright flick
yeah,
kind of
if they just
film.
hear from the director of The Conjuring and the trailer really just makes it look like another kind of
James Wan
entry in the,
horror movie.
yeah, and it really doesn't give away some of the more ridiculous kind of stuff in the movie. I feel like that will throw people off, and I think it will be a little divisive with everyday audiences because of that. Like people are just gonna go, no, it's fucking terrible. That like everyone's bad in this movie. It's not scary. Like I understand, and the people are just gonna go, it's ridiculous, and like it's a movie you got to be in the right mindset for. And I think we were on board with it, and there will be a lot of people who are on board with it, but I could see it going the other way as well. But like I had a blast at that movie. And then Cry Macho um, also didn't I kind of liked it. It was fine. It was very kind of chill, and I think it is a perfect spot where if Clint Eastwood just wanted to kind of, that's good, Clint, you can go retire and chill for the, last years of your life. But I don't, it didn't stick with me, but I enjoyed it while I watched it.
Yeah, it's a film that kind of meanders,
Yeah.
and as you mentioned, it does have that kind of hangout kind of vibe to it, where like the crux of the story is this old school rodeo star goes on one last sort of ride. And in this case, he's helping a former employer played by Dwight Yoakam, get his estranged
Who's
son back.
shockingly bad in the movie.
I know, and Dwight Yoakam is usually good. I
Yeah.
love him in Panic Room, and like he's amazing in Sling Blade. And anytime he pops up in a movie, like the last time I saw him in something that I was like, oh, it's really great to see you again, was in Logan Lucky, the Steven Soderbergh film as the warden. But yeah, no, I agree with you. But that I think goes to the point of like the Clint Eastwood style of directing, where one or two take Clint, right? And so yeah, like it's basically the story of him getting his Dwight Yoakam's estranged son back to him, who lives in Mexico, and you can only imagine that it's Clint's version of Mexico, where some of it is idyllic and then the other part of it is the classic kind of rootin' tootin' cowboys versus everyone else kind of style, where there's some political incorrectness to it all. And then the title itself refers to a rooster,
a cock.
Yes, Clint's cock was the original title, but the studio was like, maybe Clint, you should. And it's funny thinking about this as well, because this is a film that Clint's been wanting to make for about 30 years, and he felt that he was too young for the role 30 years ago. But now he might be a little too old for the role.
It looks like the wind will snap him in half.
He's very frail, yes. And we don't want to ever make fun of somebody's age, but in terms of him sort of more as like certain scenes, it might be a little bit unbelievable, especially when it comes to him fighting a henchman who's sent out to sort of retrieve the boy.
His arm would break.
Yes. And the other thing as well with this being a Clint Eastwood movie, there is this kind of quality that you feel that like Tom Cruise and Vin Diesel have, where like he's playing out sort of like certain fantasies in his mind, where all the women in this movie fall in love with him and want to have sex with him.
Yeah.
In the same way that like one of my favorite screenings I think I've ever been to was with you watching The Mule, and going through that film, and
that threesome scene is just
there's two threesomes in that movie, and watching Clint have his shirt taken off by two younger topless women. I was watching, I was like, is this even real? Like this doesn't, like this is maybe too much into kind of Clint's sort of mindset.
But in this movie, multiple women are like, ooh, I want this man. Yeah. Like he's a real man's man. And you're like, I mean, I love it's, again, I never want to poke fun at that, because it's something we talk about, that ageism and stuff like that is not something that is maybe taken seriously. And mind you, it's just, I almost just want to be like, Clint, you can rest, dude. You could have cast someone else, or you can just hang up the boots. It's okay. Like, but I get it. Some people, like, that's his life, and he just wants to keep directing until the day he dies. So, I mean, power to him. The guy works harder and faster and more than most people, so bless him. But it ended up being it's a fine movie. Like,
it's a perfect VOD film in a way. Like, it kind of feels like it's one of those movies that you don't have to see in the theater, that when it is available on VOD,
or it's on HBO Max, right?
On HBO Max in the US, but in Canada or in other parts of the world, when it's available on VOD, it kind of feels almost perfect for that. Where like in the past, you could argue, okay, well, some of his movies kind of maybe lend themselves to kind of the scale and scope if he's shooting, a postmodern Western or something that kind of has that credibility.
Hereafter.
Well, I mean,
speaking of Tiff
film, but yeah.
Speaking of Tiff, it was the only movie in recent memory I could not get a ticket for at Tiff. Like,
well, it only had the one screening, right? Which was at the Princess of Wales?
Yeah. No, the Elgin, I believe. Okay. Yeah, I believe. Did you go to that screening? Because I remember
it was also one of those films that it's like literally, it was one screening. Clint was there, so it kind of was like
stars Matt Damon. Like it had a lot going for it for Tiff, where it was one of the only movies in recent memory I remember trying so hard to get a ticket for and couldn't do it. And that was, God, how many years ago now?
It was probably, what, 2011, 2012?
Yeah, I'm gonna look right now. But either way, I remember Hereafter. Anyway, sorry, you were saying.
But but you look like, I think the last time like one of his movies was truly like cinematic in that way was probably like Letters from Iwo Jima or the Letters from Iwo Jima or the Flags of Fathers sort of double bill kind of thing. And then even before that, like Mystic River and what have you. But
I love Mystic River,
oh, Mystic
actually.
River is great. Like when Clint Eastwood is good, he's good. Like I think Unforgiven is truly one of the great all-time sort of deconstructions of a Western and sort of looking at what revenge means, and like it's undisputed. It's a masterpiece, and like he's an interesting filmmaker in terms of like what he has kind of been producing, but at the same time you have to look at him as well. Like he's always been one of those guys, and maybe I've talked about this on the show before, or maybe I haven't. I have this weird love-hate relationship with him now, where as a kid I used to adore him, as like I always wanted to be him. Like I always thought like he was the kind of guy that, you know, was a free thinker, kind of did his own thing, and never kind of, you know, judged people based on kind of where they fell in. And like he was always the guy that was kind of helping those in need. But
Hmm.
as you learn more about Clint Eastwood the person, you come to realize that, you know, there are things about him that are a little bit unsavory when it comes to his relationship with women, especially Sandra Locke and how he treated her. And I still love the movies. Don't get me wrong. I think that, you know, the Man with No Name trilogy and a lot of the movies that he's directed, whether it be, you know, Play Misty for Me or Pale Rider, again, Unforgiven, or even into his later stage, like I'm always fascinated by his career, like even with Cry Macho. But it's just one of those things, when you learn more about the person, sometimes you have to kind of have your expectations in check,
Yeah.
and realize that, um you know, they're far from perfect, or they're far from the ideal of what you've envisioned them as.
No, Clint Eastwood was never really my thing. I mean, I'm guess I've seen more of his stuff that he's directed than even some of his. I think it was just I was never a Western kind of
Did you
guy, and
ever
even when I
watch the
was
Dirty
younger,
Harry movies, or?
no, never did anything for
Yeah,
me, man. So I just like I think I've seen the majority of the movies he's directed, but I just never went back and
because he's
just never
directed
did
a
anything.
lot.
Oh, I know. I've seen. I say majority, but I think he's one of those guys where depending on what he's making, I go, do I need to go see this or not?
Right.
And like, I mean, I think his recent stuff since,
Well, it's
I
into
think,
the 2000s, and I mean, you've
yeah,
seen Unforgiven though, right?
yeah,
Like,
I know, yeah, I
yeah,
have,
yeah. Where like I feel like there was that period after Mystic River where it's like everything he made people were really excited about. Unforgiven was kind of like that. Unforgiven was his Oscar movie, you know, as well, because that
yeah,
was the first time he was nominated and won for directing and picture, but he was also nominated for acting. And then Mystic River kind of came up, and um and then, you know, you had $1 Million Baby, which was that other movie that was kind of like, it defined the Oscar season because it was a last minute release.
right,
And
right,
that was a
right.
film that was like, okay, everybody thought Martin Scorsese's finally going to win, you know, his Oscar for The Aviator. And then Clint Eastwood's like, I'm not through yet. And then, you know, releases $1 Million Baby, which wins, you know, picture and directing, and best actress for Hilary Swank, and supporting
I like
actor for
Million Dollar
Morgan.
Baby
Yeah,
too.
it's fine. I don't think it's a bad movie. I think it's like, it's a film over time people have kind of not, it hasn't kind of held its esteem, and
No,
after
yeah,
winning that, you know, in that year. um but yeah, it was just interesting overall. Like his career is just kind of fascinating, going from, you know, like a TV actor to kind of an Italian, sort of Italian American superstar in Sergio Leone westerns, then coming back and becoming sort of this marquee, sort of old school kind of western crime leading man, and then, you know, kind of slowly becoming this prestigious kind of movie maverick. And
hmm
his career trajectory has been fascinating. The worst thing he's ever produced is probably Scott Eastwood, but uh besides that, he's just had a really, same thing with Tom Hanks, with Chet Hanks.
yeah.
But just
I
looking
think
at,
that's like most that kind of tracks to me. Like I
yeah,
guess I think Chet's probably worse than Scott, but like
yes.
um but being, kind of an entitled, son of a big movie star, I could see, that
But I
goes to your
also
head a
get the
little bit.
feeling, and again, like I'm not really that versed in his home life, but you look at Clint Eastwood's marriages and you look at like the affairs that he also had, I almost get the feeling that Clint Eastwood wasn't around for Scott Eastwood, and maybe
Oh
that's
yeah,
also part of
probably.
it, where he didn't have that father figure or that father in his life that maybe he needed.
Yeah.
But again, I mean, Scott Eastwood, you never hear anything bad about him. He's not. I'm not saying in
Oh no
terms of.
no.
I'm just in terms of an actor. Like Clint
Actor. Yeah
Eastwood,
yeah.
you look at Clint Eastwood, and even if you don't like Clint Eastwood, you have to admit that he has this charisma and charm that kind of you understand that like that's why he's lasted all these
And it's like Wyatt
decades.
Russell and Kurt Russell, where I feel like Wyatt Russell has channeled Kurt and has,
Yes.
has something where you see Scott Eastwood and you're like,
Stiff
not
as a
quite,
board.
yeah, not
Stiff
quite
as a
there.
board. Where
Yeah.
like even like again, I don't think Colin Hanks is great by any means, but Colin Hanks is one of those guys where like doesn't have the charm
Shit.
of his
Sorry.
dad, but he's been able to kind of put himself into character roles, thinking of like Fargo and things like that, and even Mad Men,
Jumanji.
Jumanji, where like he's okay. It's just that it's
Yeah,
almost
no,
like
he's fine. Yeah.
I feel like Colin Hanks is one of those guys that is just like, I'll do my own thing. Like I
Yeah,
don't.
he could coast his whole life if he wants, but he'll take an acting role here and there, and he's
Yeah, the
totally
closest
fine.
he
Yeah.
ever came to trying to kind of like be a big name or break out was Orange County with Jack Black.
Oh God, yeah, that was perfect for us. Eric, we've gone 20 minutes without mentioning the Super Mario Brothers movie cast because I know this is our TIFF wrap up episode. We'll get to that. That'll be the big topic at the end, I think. Does that
I
make sense
No,
for
this will be
TIFF
the
or
big
should we?
topic.
I know, but like TIFF, we should cover
Yeah,
the
yeah, yeah.
universe of TIFF,
We'll
but
get through
like
that. I mean, I think we should kind of tie up any
these are the
loose
hot
ends
the
and
hot button topics that we need to
yes.
talk about before we get to our okay, yeah, we finished up TIFF. Here's some good movies that we saw that we didn't necessarily cover. So on I think it was what was it like Friday of last week? I
It was
forget.
last week sometime. It was all a blur.
There was a Nintendo Direct, which if you're not a video game person, Nintendo does these little virtual press conferences where they announce new games and things that are coming up, trailers, things like that. And you tune in if you're a Nintendo fan because you want to see what new games are coming out. You want to see, oh, I want to play Mario Party at the end of the year. Let's see that. Animal Crossing, yay! But then halfway through, we get Shigeru Miyamoto come out and say, hey, the Mario Brothers movie, Illumination's making it. You guys know that. We don't have anything to show you guys today, but we do have the cast.
We do have
And
headshots that have been
we do have
photoshopped.
headshots, which are always wonderful. We see them during Disney conferences that we go to every year where they don't have anything to show you, but we do have professional headshots with a title of who they're playing, which I don't think anyone was expecting to get during this presentation, although it does kind of make sense. So everyone's like, oh, is Charles Martinet going to be playing Mario? Because he's played Mario for 30 years, 30
Right.
plus years. So, but Mario doesn't necessarily have a lot of dialogue in the games. It goes, "It's a me, a Mario," and then like that's basically woohoo, and like he basically says little quips, and he doesn't speak. Peach speaks sometimes. No one else really
Well, he
speaks.
does say battle in
Sure.
Mario Kart 64
Yeah,
when you
yeah,
do the
he does
battle
say little.
section.
Yeah,
Yeah.
he does say little words here and there, right? And you know what?
Battle.
Yeah, you know what Mario sounds like, and Luigi and Toad and like Toad makes weird noises and shit like that.
I mean, Mario sounds
Anyways,
like Bob Hoskins.
yes, exactly. Anyways, we come out. First thing we see, Chris Pratt playing Mario, and you're like, oh no. And you're like, no. And then we've talked enough about Chris Pratt. I know his, again, talking about someone whose politics and kind of stuff is a little not so great. Then you go, he's been in everything in the last, 5 to 10 years.
Well, the studio system has been trying to force him
Universal
to become a
specifically
movie
too.
star, right? Where we liked the Tomorrow War. We admittedly
I
liked the
did,
film.
and I thought he was good in that. And
And we like him in supporting roles. Moneyball, he's great, which just celebrated
Yep.
its 10th anniversary. Zero
I think he's
Dark
great
30.
in Parks and Rec is
Yep.
a comedic, and I think this Mario movie will be comedic, obviously being from Illumination. But he also played, the lead in the Lego movie, right?
Yeah,
Which is Emmett in the Lego movie, which is I'm assuming going to have like a similar vibe to this movie. And I don't know. Then you're like, okay, that's weird, but okay. Next up, you're like, Princess Peach is playing by Anya Taylor-Joy, and you're like, okay, all right,
Well,
that's
I think that actually, like, if you look at that
no,
cast,
I think it's
for the most part, I think that is that is quote unquote the. I mean, yes, Chris Pratt
oh, I'll get to all of this, but I do think
but
that casting is good for
yeah,
Princess
and I
Peach.
almost feel like it's like how did you get her? Because you look
Yeah,
at, she's got about like 5 or 6 films, and yes, I know it's only, she goes into a voice booth and records, or soundproof booth, but and does like 48 hours or something like that. But like, out of all those names, that is the one that kind of feels like the most in touch with sort of
yeah,
what's going on now, where Chris Pratt kind of feels like it's somebody that thinks that, like, Guardian the first Guardians just came out
came out.
and he's
Yeah,
still a superstar, where he's kind of like, his credibility is kind of waned a little bit.
yeah. So Chris Pratt was shocking. Anya Taylor-Joy, I'm like, I like that casting. I think her voice would be well suited for Princess Peach, and I think that's kind of cool. And like you said, I'm surprised they got her. Then you get Charlie Day as Luigi, which I'm like is I just like I don't understand, but okay, you know what? I'm here for it. Like you know what? I don't get it,
Also in the
but
Lego movie.
yes, as the spaceman, right?
Yep.
Like and there's that Chris Miller, I think, posted them with mustaches and the Mario hats on. I wore a green toque in honor of Luigi. Um then you get Jack Black as Bowser, and I'm like, that's kind of perfect, and I'm into this. And I'm like, I have no idea what that's gonna be. I love Jack Black.
Will he be as
And
good as Dennis Hopper's King Koopa? We'll find
we'll
out.
have to find out. Um, and then you get something random with Keegan Michael Key as Toad. I'm like, all right, I have no idea where this movie's going. And then Seth Rogen as Donkey Kong, which I'm like, this is the weirdest thing I've ever seen in my life, and I have no idea. Like all of these characters to me, because I'm a huge Nintendo kid. Like I love Mario so much, and the NES and the Super NES and the Nintendo 64, which they just announced for the Virtual Console on Switch. I just every Nintendo system I've owned, I've played every single Mario game, and it's those characters are so iconic to me. I can't envision these I'll only hear these actors and stuff and coming out of what these characters are. It just doesn't make any sense, and I think everyone lost their minds because of this. Like Seth Rogen as Donkey Kong is so funny to me. And then you have, like, they announced some of the other people in the movie. So you have Fred Armisen as Cranky Kong, Kevin Michael Richardson as Kamek, which makes more sense because he is a voice actor. And then Sebastian Maniscalco as Foreman Spike. And then Charles Martinet will be in the movie in surprise cameos, whatever that means. And I'm sure this is only a fraction of the cast, because I'm assuming this will be like the lead cast.
Who is
And
playing
then,
Wario and
God, you
Waluigi
got to
and
think,
Yoshi?
because you got to think that it will kind of be like the Lego movie, where they'll get a bunch of people to just do small cameo roles, and they'll be big name actors, much like Charlie Day. While he was more of a lead in some of the Lego movies, but you had like Channing Tatum and Jonah Hill as Superman and Green Lantern
Yeah.
and stuff like that. And you had people pop in and
Colby
do different.
Smulders as Wonder Woman, and yeah.
Yeah, and stuff like that. So I have a feeling that's maybe what we'll get with all these other Nintendo characters. But
So
I
Jared
think,
Leto,
like,
there's still a chance for him to
there's
show
still a
up.
chance.
I think the
Yeah.
one I laughed at the most, in terms of like everybody kind of like trolling those sort of that reaction to the
Yeah.
announcement, was someone, I can't remember
Twitter
who it was
lost
on
their
Twitter,
minds. It was funny.
because it was just a deluge of tweets. Was someone was like, Laurie Metcalf is Yoshi,
Yeah.
which was like,
Yeah.
hey, I'm up
Yeah.
for it.
Yeah. That's what you could, there was a great tweet thread, was like, you could put any actor headshot beside any character from Mario and I'd believe it with this cast. You just put anyone and anyone, and there's a great thread on Twitter that's just people putting headshots of Mario characters with random ass actors. I think one was like a warp pipe and Daniel Day-Lewis and something, or like, and you're like, yeah, that makes
Oh,
sense.
like
And
the Little Shop of Horrors kind of
yeah, the
plant creature.
piranha plant. Yeah, that was one of them too. And so I am, again, I'm not a huge Illumination fan. Like, I hate the Minions. I think, and Eric, I think you're in the same boat with me there.
Yeah.
And just a lot of Illumination movies have not landed with me. Like I left Secret Life of Pets. I didn't mind Sing. I think the Grinch movie is just, derivative and kind of pointless. Um, I like the first Despicable Me movie. Never even saw the Lorax or Minions. So I'm kind of just like, I feel like they're all over the place to me, and I that worries me maybe the most. But with Nintendo being involved and Miyamoto being involved, and it says Nintendo and Illumination presents, like Nintendo's like, no, you have to have our branding right on there.
And they want to
And
be in control because of the live action version of Super Mario Brothers. Almost kind of, well, not, it didn't destroy their brand or their reputation, but it was kind of something that you can tell that after that they haven't really been involved with the film industry since then.
Mhm. No, they haven't done a single. They're very protective of their properties usually. And their quality control is usually pretty good. Like they really don't put out stuff that is horrible. And someone might go, "Well, you're wrong, blah blah blah." I
The
think like
GameCube.
I really think that they make a lot of weird decisions and a lot of bad decisions when it comes to, things with their games and stuff like that. Like, but their quality control for Mario specifically and their big characters is usually pretty good. So I'm fascinated by this. I think this cast is absolutely bananas.
It almost
Um
feels like a game of roulette in terms of its casting, where it's just like, let's just see where the ball lands, and if it
for a big
lands,
name comedic actor or
yeah,
whatever,
and then
right? Yeah.
we'll just pick them. Like Jack Black could be Mario. Like you could switch
Yeah.
those roles, and it almost feels like Pratt would almost actually be better as Bowser.
And I'm like, is Chris Pratt going to do a voice? Is he going to
Oh
just be Chris
God.
Pratt? Like this is what I'm fat. I have no idea what any of these people are going to sound like. I'm assuming Seth Rogen will just sound like Seth Rogen for Donkey Kong.
With his
And I'm like,
laugh.
and Keegan Michael Key will just sound like Keegan Michael Key as Toad. And like Jack Black will probably just be Jack Black. The people, I'm like, Chris Pratt and Charlie Day as Mario and Luigi, I'm struggling. I'm like, are they just going to be Chris Pratt and Charlie Day? And I'm assuming that's what they'll just sound like. Everyone is just going to sound like themselves.
Yeah, well,
And
you think of Bob Hoskins and John Leguizamo as well. Like, I mean, they just sounded, Cockney
classic
and
Italians.
American, right? Yeah.
I mean, that's what I mean. And again, Mario is, created by a Japanese company. Like, it's not like it's an Italian stereotype itself. And like, it's not necessarily like, oh, I can't believe, like, everyone made jokes on Twitter about all of this of like, oh, real Italian Chris Pratt and stuff. And like, and Bob Hoskins too. But like, um, I'm just fascinated, Eric, because like I love Mario. I want this movie to be good, or at least fun. And you know what? It's so batshit, like with this cast, and I just can't even envision their voices as these characters that I'm all in on it. Where I'm like, I cannot wait to see what this is. It'll either be a train wreck or it'll be a pleasant surprise of going like that was a fun kids movie. And I don't know, with Illumination, like obviously like they're from a technical standpoint, like the movie will look really nice, and I have no doubt. I have no idea what the story. I'm assuming it'll be a classic, Bowser steals the princess kind of thing and Mario has to, but involving Donkey Kong, that means like they're starting to involve, well, that here, I guess Mario and Donkey Kong are very connected because of the original Donkey Kong game, and Mario was saving the princess from Donkey Kong in that original, that original game where he's climbing up the
Yeah, from the movie
ladders and yeah,
Pixels.
yes, thank you. um, God damn it. Um, I never know how much video game stuff I need to explain or not,
No, no,
but
no. I know the
I don't
basics
want to. I don't want to
of
game splain
Nintendo.
things. Like,
No, no,
yeah.
no. And I appreciate that because I know the basics when it comes to the Nintendo stuff. Up until the end of N64. My brother Kyle, who's still a gamer, kind of went on to GameCube before switching over to Xbox.
Mhm. So what is your read? Do you think this is going to be a train wreck? Do you think it'll be perfectly fine? Like, do you think like it'll
Well, I
just be
think that
kind of
it's
a standard?
animated. That like again, you brought up some criticisms and some sort of skepticism
I guess the
towards.
Sonic movie is maybe a good comparison of,
Yeah, but you
but
brought up the skepticism towards Illumination as a whole. But I think
yeah.
at least if you're doing an animated film, there's more control over the overall look and feel and design, and like with the live action kind of movie, like if you've read or seen any of the behind the scenes features, that film went through multiple reincarnations in the script. it,
And what
it
we got
had
is just wild.
but it like, again, like there was so many behind the scenes problems where that film was falling apart at the seams, and it became a nightmare to make and lost so much money. Where at least if you're doing an animated film, you don't have to worry about the logistics of, like, shooting on a specific day, or a certain
Right.
soundstage, or having the actors in this scene, or worrying about the actors' safety, because Bob Hoskins has talked about being he was electrocuted on set of the Super Mario Brothers film, and John Leguizamo has been very much candid about his experience on that movie, and thinking about, like, it was down to John Leguizamo and Tom Hanks for Luigi back in the early 90s, and at that
Imagine.
time Tom Hanks's sort of box office was fading, because after Big he did the Brian De Palma movie, Bonfire of the Vanities, and things like that, and so it wasn't until A League of Their Own where he kind of came back. But the people that were making Super Mario Brothers, like, we don't want Tom Hanks. So it's just kind of baffling. But yeah, I think it's going to be one of those movies where it's like, it'll be fine. It'll be totally fine.
I
I
think
think
it
that it's
will be
animated,
fine,
it's
yeah.
playing it safe. If it were live action, or a combination of live action and
Like Sonic.
animated, like Sonic. But it will be interesting to see how this does, how the Last of Us series does, and, like, I feel like this is like the ultimate kind of last stand for
This and The Last of
video.
Us, I think, are perfect examples of these are the two video game things that need to be good.
And even Sonic 2, I think, to a
Yeah.
certain extent, because because of that first one doing so well, and they want to prove that, Paramount wants to prove that it wasn't just sort of a flash in the
One and
pan kind
done,
of
yeah.
thing. But I almost feel like this is the last stand for a lot of video game adaptations, and I'm not including Resident Evil, Welcome to Raccoon City, but, like, it just kind of feels like, okay, like, if these don't work, we're probably going to see the studios go off of
Just
them
we're not
completely.
touching them,
But
yeah.
if they do, you're going to see them buy up every single property that there is, and sort of basically not only green light certain things, but sort of basically just get them into production. Like, even something like the Metal Gear Solid movie, where I feel like they're almost kind of waiting, not necessarily on those films, just to kind of see, like, okay, let's see what the next couple years are like, and decide whether or not that's going to work. And
I agree, yeah.
it's like with board game movies. Like, there was a period where
everyone bought Monopoly and
Ridley Scott was going to direct the
Yeah.
Monopoly movie, and then you had Battleship go into production, and studios were like, okay, maybe this is going to be the next kind of big trend to kind of compete with
And it was
superhero
not.
films. Yeah, and it wasn't at all.
Although when they start playing Battleship with real battleships, where it's like B-42 or whatever, and like, oh god, what a movie. Yeah, I totally agree with you. And I feel like if this is successful, we'll see Illumination do a new Nintendo movie, I think, every couple years. Like, we'll get a Zelda movie, we'll get
I want Star
a
Fox. I
Star
would
Fox.
be down for Star
Dude,
Fox.
they're absolutely, I would love a Star Fox movie with puppets, because that's originally how they did the Star Fox characters and stuff like that. But
well, there was the College Humor Wes Anderson
yeah,
Star Fox video where they
which is
did the stop
great.
motion. It's amazing, and it was almost like, I wish this was real. Like, it was too
Yeah.
good to be a parody. Like, that's how the quality was. But I like that, out of any of them, the Star Fox movie would kind of make the most sense, just in terms
I think
of
Zelda too, though.
yeah, sci-fi and fantasy in general would be the most kind of popular to adapt. And for the adult crowd, maybe Conker's Bad Fur Day.
I mean, but which is Microsoft now, because
Right.
bought,
It was
they
Nintendo
bought
though,
Rare
originally, right?
Well, that Rare, who made a lot of the Donkey Kong Country games, was partnered with Nintendo to make a lot of those games. They made Conker's Bad Fur Day. They made the Donkey Kong games. They made Donkey Kong 64. But they sold to Microsoft years back. So Microsoft now owns Conker and some of that stuff,
But you
which
could
is why
even
it's
see
been.
them getting into it, right? Like even something
Oh
with
yeah,
like Sony with like, I mean, obviously we're getting Uncharted, which it's still kind of hard to believe that that's actually coming in. And
in
again,
February or
look,
March or
look
something.
at the casting on that. Like not Tom Holland per se, but I know you've been talking about Mark Wahlberg
Or
as Sully
Wahlberg
kind
as
of
Sully is the
being
worst. I
miscast.
just don't know. I gotta see that, but like I just don't know. But
Yeah, and you could even see like something like Crash Bandicoot, right? Where like I feel
yeah,
like that would be a property as
an
well with,
animated movie. Yeah.
you know, the success of Sonic and possibly Mario, like, you know, Sony wanting to put their hat in the game as well. So
Yeah, Naughty Dog no, Activision owns Crash Bandicoot. Naughty Dog used to make it, who made Uncharted and The Last of Us, made Crash Bandicoot, but they didn't own Crash Bandicoot, I think. So I think Activision owns Crash Bandicoot now, but yeah, I think a lot is relying on Mario and The Last of Us, which are both coming next year. And I do think that it'll be interesting to see if Nintendo goes and partners with other studios for things. Like I know there was that rumored Legend of Zelda movie or a TV show at Netflix which just fell apart. And then this Mario movie is happening. We have a cast, we have a poster, like it's going to come out, which is wild. And it'll be interesting if it's successful. Do they just partner with them and maybe we get a Donkey Kong spin-off movie, right? Like Donkey Kong Country makes sense
like
to
the
be.
Lego films, right?
Yeah, like Donkey Kong Country makes sense to be a spin-off from this Mario movie, and then you get someone
Luigi's
cast as
Haunted
Diddy.
Mansion.
Yeah, Luigi's Mansion. Like people, there will be spin-offs, like a Smash, and then maybe it's leading up to like an Avengers style Super Smash Brothers movie, right? Like
Right.
I could see that kind of stuff happening where you're getting a Nintendo, like Universal would love a cinematic universe and an animated one for children as well, right? So you have all these
Kirby would
Nintendo
be huge, I think, for
characters,
kids.
Kirby, yeah, like you could do all of this stuff. And if Illumination is going to be that studio that builds this kind of, like they've made 5 Despicable Me movies with the 2 Minion ones and the 3 Despicable Me movies, so I can't see why, if this wasn't successful, that they wouldn't do spin-offs and things like that. But um I don't think it's going to be a train wreck. Like I think the
I think it'll
voices
be
will
fine.
be.
I think if it was live action, there would be more of a
Sure, yeah.
possibility for it being a complete and utter
Oh god, if it
disaster.
was Chris Pratt and Charlie Day is in a live action Mario movie. But I think the animation will be gorgeous. I think it'll be pretty faithful to, with Nintendo being so heavily involved. And that's something that I've talked about, right? With Naughty Dog being very involved in the Last of Us series, and they brought in the director and the writer of the game and stuff like that. Like it seems like these video game studios aren't just selling their IP off and then going, do whatever you want. And
Well,
then
because
like
they've
what
learned from that, right? Because
yeah.
when you do that, you get an Assassin's Creed or you get a Max Payne, and you know, yes, you make money off of that sale, but they're probably also looking at it like, how is it going to affect, you know, gameplay and people's interest in it
And
afterwards? Because
that's
I know you
that's a
still like
great point.
Hitman, but
Yeah.
I'm sure
The Hitman movies
the
just
Hitman movies
awful.
are terrible. But like you look at those films and it's like they're I mean what they're basically doing for you know these game studios is they're advertising the game to interest people that
So
maybe
that's why I think there's no way this is bad, because
right.
Nintendo cares way too much about Mario and his future for this to be an absolute shit show nightmare. Like there's no way, I will call it right now. There's no way this movie is horrible. At worst, it's going to be
Middle
perfectly
of the
fine.
road.
Yeah, like forgettable, like, oh, that was cute, but it's not going to ruin Mario. Um, so I don't know. Like that's why I have a little bit of faith, and then it could go the other route where it's great. Like, and that's what I hope. Like I really hope this is more Lego Movie than anything, right? And I know the directors on it are the 2 guys who directed Teen Titans Go to the Movies, which I actually quite enjoyed. I thought was really clever and really fun. And if they take that kind of vibe and that they took with DC characters in that movie and apply it to Nintendo characters, like I think you could have something that's really fun here. And I think Nintendo, just because these characters haven't been voiced by anyone else, I think that's the most jarring thing, where we're used to other voice actors. Like Nicolas Cage can come in and be Superman in the Teen Titans Go movie. Even that's a kind of a meta joke in itself, but you can
Well,
have different
Batman
voice
though, I would
actors.
look
Yeah.
at like Kevin
How many different
Conroy
how
is
many different actors have come in and done Batman's voice,
right.
right? Like,
But he did, just in
um,
terms of like the casting of Chris Pratt, I think also like the biggest thing in terms of my criticisms is just that there's no imagination there. Like it just kind of feels like, oh, they cast him because one, he worked as Emmett in the Lego movie and he's done a lot of voice work now. And two, it's just like there, I mean, you didn't, yeah, you probably should have gone with an Italian American actor, but at the same time, it's like, why did you just go with Chris Pratt? Like you could have gone with anybody. Like it just feels very limited in terms of just being creative in terms of the casting. And I
yeah.
think that's probably
It's
maybe
not very inspired, let's
no,
say. Like
no.
it's
And
just very like who's the most vanilla choice for this almost. Like that's kind of how I
exactly.
think. Where I do think like Charlie Day as Luigi is more like out there, I think, to me than Chris Pratt as Mario. And like the rest of the cast I think is more inspired than Chris Pratt as Mario. Like I'd almost be totally fine with all of this if it was someone else than Chris Pratt. And I don't know who I'd even want, but um I've just softened on him and things like so I don't know. But
I
I
mean, if it
want
was
this to
Mark
be good.
Rylance, it would be better.
I would love it. Then moving over maybe to The Last of Us, and then we can go into Bond because you mentioned Hitman, and uh, funnily enough, the Hitman team is making a James Bond game now. So like, and I was watching Quantum of Solace, and we can get into that.
I think we should save the
And
Bond stuff for No Time to Die when we
you
do the
just want to
review for
include it
that.
in the review, like
Yeah, because
even
I think that would be the best place for that since we
yeah, it'll be
have a
yeah,
lot of the TIFF stuff to cover and
that's
also
true.
the Nolan stuff. And I think
Cool,
like
yeah, that's a good
we
point.
can look at sort of Daniel
And I
Craig's
still
sort of
haven't watched
tenure as
Spectre yet.
Bond. Yeah, and I
I have
haven't rewatched Skyfall or Spectre yet either.
Um, I mean, I've seen Spectre. I just haven't rewatched it. I'm in the middle of my rewatch. I just it came top of mind because you mentioned Hitman, and I
But it's still worth
my
mentioning.
one
Yeah,
point about
sure.
Quantum of Solace is just I was watching that movie and I was like, oh yeah, the Hitman team is making a Bond game. I'm like, that's gonna be awesome because there's a couple sequences in that where I'm like, just could envision the Hitman style of gameplay in a Bond game, and it's gonna be fantastic. The Last of Us don't have much to say. I said, oh hell yeah to the image, but it's literally the back of Pedro Pascal and Bella. No,
Bella,
what
yeah, Bella
Bella
Ramsey.
Ramsey? Yeah, their heads. But I like the aspect ratio. It's not quite 185 it looked like it looked like it had a little bit of a taller, shallower aspect ratio, which is really really cool. And yeah, I'm all for it. Like it looked great. It looked like a screenshot from the video game. But don't have much else to say. I wish we got a little bit more because it was Outbreak Day on the 26th, which is the Last of Us Day every year
Oh,
that they
the
kind of
Wolfgang
celebrate.
Peterson film.
Yeah.
They're
Um
celebrating that movie
yeah.
with three
So
problematic leads and Rene Russo.
oh, is it? Go
Well, because you have
gosh.
Dustin Hoffman, Kevin
Right.
Spacey, and Cuba Gooding Jr.
Right. So I wish we got a little bit more from it, but I wish maybe a teaser or something like that, but I'm here for it either
It'll probably
way.
come at the end of the year because HBO usually has like they do it every kind of sort of tier where they'll have like, oh, HBO in a year. So I guarantee that we'll probably see some of the first footage for the show probably in their like New Year's reel.
Mhm. Mhm. Um I just can't wait for it. Cannot wait. And then the other big piece of news before we get into the TIFF stuff, speaking of Universal, which we were just talking about with Illumination and Mario, Chris Nolan uh, did what we all thought he would do and said goodbye to Warner Brothers because he was pissed about their HBO Max strategy in 2021. And he went to the highest bidder, which happened to be Universal. And the terms of his deal were insane. And he got exactly what he wanted. He's one of those filmmakers that can go, this is what I want. I want Final Cut. I want $100 million budget. I want no movies to be released by your studio 3 weeks before my movie and 3 weeks after my movie.
Jeez.
And I want an exclusive window of like 100 days in theaters, right? As well
And
as
then
like
a
other,
marketing budget to
yeah,
match the budget of the film, which is another $100 million.
Yeah. And then I think there were some more things in there. Obviously, final cut, obviously complete control. Like he gets final say on everything. And I think that made a couple people walk. I forget who it was. I think it was Apple or someone was like, nah, and pieced out, even though he let them come in and pitch. And then I think it was down to Sony and Universal, correct? And
Yeah,
then
and
I
I
think
was thinking it would be Sony because you think of the way that they wooed Tarantino with Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, that those guys are kind of on the same page when it comes to the theatrical experience. And like Universal does have Peacock, and obviously, with Halloween Kills, they're releasing that day and date now. So there's this sort of maybe intrepidation when it comes to certain filmmakers now thinking, oh well, if my movie isn't good enough to play theatrically, or given the times that we're in, they might throw it on Peacock in the US. And like
Well, I
there's
think
actually
you're going to see a lot more filmmakers now put a clause in their deal that says
yeah,
you cannot put it on streaming before it's in theaters.
there's a movie on Peacock right now that I didn't even know about until yesterday that was released at the beginning of September, and it has had no marketing whatsoever. And it's from James DeMonaco, the director of the Purge movies, where he made his like little Staten Island sort of 80s throwback going to the movies, and all happening over the course of one night with Frank Grillo and Naomi Watts, called This Is the Night, where a version of him as a kid goes to see Rocky 3 and kind of gets into all these weird adventures. And it's like there's been no advertising on that film whatsoever. And
Yeah, I
I
have
didn't even
no
know.
idea it
Yeah,
existed.
and it's out, it's on Peacock right now. And I was thinking, like, because they were talking to him, and I was thinking, oh, because the Forever Purge was just released on VOD, so maybe it was just kind of one of those things on Collider. And that film is available now in the US. And I was like, I hadn't even seen a trailer for that thing. And
Yeah.
apparently, like, it's so yeah, like Nolan's one of those guys where it's like thinking, like, you want him to be almost like he would make an amazing lawyer. But he's also showing that he's also a bit of a control freak and a bit of a jerk at the same time, in terms of how like his thinking is obviously thinking of a past era. He's not willing to adapt or change. He wants the medium to stay the same. And yeah, he's a filmmaker whose movies are event films, and the movie being about genius physicist Robert Oppenheimer does sound intriguing, especially considering that Nolan hasn't done, quote unquote, and who knows if this is going to be a traditional biography. There's still not really anything known on the plot. This could be about the life of Oppenheimer. It could be specifically focused on the Manhattan Project, which was him and other colleagues and physicists creating the atomic bomb. Who knows? But he's always kind of wanted to dabble. He has dabbled in history, obviously, with Dunkirk, and even to a very lesser extent with the
The
Prestige,
Prestige,
with
yeah.
Nikolai Tesla. um but he had always been wanting to do the Howard Hughes movie with Jim Carrey, right? And then that was kind of um put into turnaround because of the Scorsese film that was produced by Michael Mann, The Aviator. So it would be curious to see if he does go the more traditional biography route, but from the point of view of telling it from his style, or is he telling a film that is a little bit more abstract in the creation of the most deadliest weapon known to man. I think will be fascinating. And there's also rumors that Killian Murphy could play Oppenheimer, and I'm sure it's going to be a large cast. But if you look at Oppenheimer's career and life, there's some interesting stuff there, sort of with his relationships and sort of the after effect. And you can have this interesting conflict that he was a guy that created this horrible weapon that literally is the most sort of, it is a weapon of mass destruction, and the only, you know, country in the world to use a weapon of mass destruction was the US. So there is conflict there in terms of the storytelling. Um, but is it going to kind of be more kind of cut and dry with its narrative structure, or is he going to find a way to, play with time the way that he has with a lot of his movies?
Yeah. Um yeah, we go back and forth on Nolan. I love the guy. You have a Dark Knight tattoo or a Batman tattoo.
Yes.
And Nolan was the guy for the longest time, especially when we were coming up as, young men, I guess, really into movies, and, and me and blockbuster cinema and stuff like that. Like, Batman Begins going into the Dark Knight, and like, and he's still one of the number one guys, which is why he can, even after Tenet being kind of a bomb, like, which, yeah, asterisk because of the situation we were in. But it's just, yeah, it's fascinating. I mean, I don't love some of the stuff he says sometimes, where it feels like he's a little full of himself, and I think that kind of comes across in this deal where he's holier than thou, or I'm better than everyone kind of thing. But um
Or he just doesn't
I
take
will,
into account the pandemic, because part of
yeah.
with Tenet was like, in all of his interviews and conversations, it's like you're not even acknowledging the fact that we're going through this major change that could, if you go and see this movie, you could die if you get sick, and like he never even acknowledged the fact that people were getting sick. It was all about releasing his film. And I mean, maybe part of that was why I had a negative approach to the movie, but you watch that film and you're like, this was not worth all of that kind of, you know, posturing of him being, about the cinemas, the savior of cinema. And I think that is the thing that he's going to really have to do some retconning on, in terms of reapproaching the situation. And yeah, he's not a charming and you know affable filmmaker. He's a cold, clinical guy who's very much, style over substance, and interested in sort of breaking down the world in that kind of way, which there's nothing wrong with that. It's just that you
No,
look at someone like Chloe Zhao, for instance, who, is riding high off of the success of Nomadland, it's going into Eternals. If she had something original to pitch, she couldn't do what Nolan did.
yeah.
And there is this kind of white man, kind of like overbearing, I have to be number one kind of thing that's going on as well with Nolan, where part of it is also there's that sort of toxic fandom that comes into play as well, where like anything that you criticize when it comes to Nolan or Denis Villeneuve or, Zack Snyder, um people don't want to hear it. His fan base just will not
There's no
even
nuance. It's just,
fathom,
yeah.
oh, how dare you criticize our Messiah. And it's just one of those
Because
things
we
where,
both love Nolan, but like, I
yeah,
think he's
he's not
open to
immune to,
criticism. Yeah.
to criticism.
Yeah, and I think that's the thing. So again, am I excited for the movie? Of course. And it's interesting now he's partnered with a new studio, and how that's going to play out. I'm sure it'll be pretty normal, but we won't see a lot of the behind the scenes stuff. So ultimately he's had basically final cut and all this stuff on his last bunch of movies anyway. So I think it's just gonna have a different logo in front of it, and that's pretty much the only difference we're gonna see. But
Yeah, like he'll probably
it's
still
just.
hire Hoyt van Hoytema, and you'll probably have
Do you think
an
Wally
A.
Pfister is just gonna go back to being a cinematographer? What's after he did Transcendence, or what happened to that guy?
Well, he directed some TV. I think he did a couple episodes of the Amazon series The Tick.
Okay,
But that's a good question, because he was a very talented
cinematographer,
cinematographer.
yeah.
I mean, the guy even shot Moneyball. And so I don't know. I think Transcendence is one of those movies that truly is a career killer in a lot of ways, and somebody had to pay for that film, quote unquote, and he was the one that really sort of took the brunt of that.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe rightfully so, because it is a horrible film.
Oh, it's awful.
But it's just a shame, because it's his trajectory is kind of fascinating as well, because you have a guy who started in softcore adult
Porn?
films,
Oh
yeah,
yeah.
in the late 80s, early 90s, and then kind of hitches his wagon to Christopher Nolan and does some really great stuff. I mean, he won an Oscar for Inception. But yeah, I just feel like that transition from cinematographer to director just didn't work, and there's not as many transitions there. Like, I think one of the most successful is probably someone like Alfonso Cuarón, who went to school for cinematography but
Mm-hmm.
ultimately became a director. Or you
Wasn't
have
Barry
Barry
Sonnenfeld?
Sonnenfeld, yeah,
Yeah,
who
yeah.
worked for the Coen brothers. But even him, like, you look at, like, yeah, he directed the Addams Family movies and the Men in
Men in
Black
Black,
films,
yeah.
but then, you know, as soon as he makes Nine Lives, that cat movie with Kevin
Oh, right.
Spacey, you know, he's basically gone to television now, and Netflix. I think he did the Lemony Snicket series. So
Oh, and didn't he just do that musical series on Apple,
yeah,
right? Didn't he? I forget what Schmigadoon.
yeah.
He directed all the episodes of Schmigadoon,
And
or
he's a
some of them.
very likable, like, he's one of those guys where, like, I could listen to him talk for hours. Like, if you do you have the Blood Simple Blu-ray on Criterion?
No, I don't have Blood Simple,
Okay,
no.
that is definitely worth picking up because there's an audio commentary with the Coens and Barry Sonnenfeld, and Sonnenfeld talks about, like, not having watched any of the Coen brothers movies past the films that he shot with them, and that his movies
Oh,
that he
so they
shot with the
recorded it more
Coens.
recently?
Yeah,
Like,
yeah,
so
and
yeah.
that because they're still buddies. Like, they didn't
Yeah.
have a falling out or anything. It's just that Sonnenfeld went on to become a
To do
director.
his own stuff,
But,
yeah.
but Sonnenfeld's like, yeah, I don't think any of the Coen brothers movies, you know, past my work are as good as the ones that we did.
That's good. That's some good shit. Um, did you want to talk about anything else like that you've been watching or anything, or should we go into just TIFF stuff,
I think we should kind of wrap it
or
up
the
with
Netflix stuff? Like, I don't know. There's not much to touch on the TUDUM
yeah,
stuff. Like,
yeah. You mentioned the Netflix stuff.
So we got a release date for Cobra Kai season 4, which I think is the biggest thing, which is December 31st. So 2 seasons of Cobra Kai in 1 year, January 1st and December 31st, which I think is fantastic.
The
Little
return of Terry
snippet.
Silver.
Yeah, you got that ponytail, baby. Really quick trailer. I will say that with Cobra Kai, the trailers never make the show look as good as it is. They're always kind of corny and bad. And I get the show is kind of corny at times, but it's like a fun corny. But the trailers always have this really generic, like really generic titles and editing to make it look like this really cheap looking like if you're not interested in Cobra Kai already, there's nothing in that trailer that I think would have made you excited about Cobra Kai, which is unfortunate. I just feel like the marketing for that show can never nail what that show actually is, and they try to maybe appeal to everyone and make these very generic kind of trailers. So that's my only thing about I don't know if you felt the same, Eric.
Yeah, I
About
mean,
it. Yeah.
it's like if you were watching this and you were here, like, you know, now that it is a Emmy nominated show
Netflix original series
for best, is it drama?
comedy. No,
Oh,
comedy.
comedy.
Yeah,
It
yeah.
would be better if it was best drama. It'd actually be pretty funny. For best comedy, it's like you think, oh, maybe I'll give this a go now that it's kind of been dubbed an award nominated thing. Um, it to me kind of feels like they're like, to your point, they're trying to sell to everybody where they should just be selling to, you know, the people that have become fans, and then, you know, in part, you know, you're being specific where then I think more people would be interested to be like, okay, you know what, maybe I should go back to the start and watch this thing that is very, you know, specific, because again, you know, we're talking Netflix right now. A lot of Netflix programming, whether it be film or television, you got to cut through the noise, right? Like, there's just so much of it that it's almost like you look at like even when you're not watching something and your TV goes into that kind of browser mode where, like, you see like certain shows or movies coming to Netflix and you're like,
Yeah.
I haven't even heard of this. And so
Mhm.
it's like, how do you make a show stand out, not just based on the material that's in the show, but the actual advertising?
I
And
think
you
they
coming
just
from a marketing background,
yeah.
it's a question that I think I would love
It's
to ask
not
you. Like, just
necessarily I don't think it's necessarily quantity over quality more so than they just rely on people finding the stuff out through their own circles. Does that make sense? Like
but it
they
does feel
put
like a quantity thing in general
it
with
is
Netflix,
quantity in
where
general. They want to make something for everyone, right? Which is why I don't think that they care that they release so much at the same time every week, right? Because they're
yeah,
not trying to make something for every they are trying to make something for everyone, but not everything is for everyone.
yeah,
So what they're doing is releasing a metric shit ton of content, and some stuff they don't even put marketing dollars behind, and some things they don't, because they kind of rely on you being on Twitter or on your favorite website or whatever to find out about the things that you're interested in, I think. So like whether it's a creator you're interested in, a director, an actor, whatever, I think they're relying pretty heavily on you going, I'm interested in vacation shows, so I'm going to know about world's best vacation rentals just because I'm interested in that. So I will probably find out about that through other things. And maybe these things are being more targeted marketing in places where, we're not going. So we don't see the marketing on a lot of that stuff, where if it was something we were interested in, they would market it to us, or maybe we're just not paying attention to that, where we know about the movies that are coming out for the most part, because that's the world that we live in every day. Or some of the shows, like we knew Midnight Mass came out and things like that. Like, I don't see big mass Netflix campaigns like on TV and things like that. You go and seek out a trailer because we're on Twitter and the people we follow are interested in similar things, so we see when a trailer drops or something like that, where I don't know, like I feel like they make something for everyone and they go, what you're into and you will find it if it's for you, and then they kind of rely on that, right? And
But it's
then
also exhausting as well,
oh,
just thinking of
definitely.
like what you have to keep up with in terms of like, okay, yeah, you mentioned, the Mike Flanagan show, Midnight Mass, which I'll probably, maybe
I'll
watch
get to
this.
in
Yeah,
October,
yeah.
yeah.
But then you think at the same time, it's like, okay, between now and, the next week or the next 2 weeks, I'm sure there's going to be like 5 or 6 other shows or movies that you're going to be talking about. And
Mhm.
then that other show kind of just dissipates.
Yeah.
Like everything that Netflix releases when it comes to series, even some films, um it's like it's very much in the moment, and then it kind of disappears, and then like you like the longevity of Netflix programming doesn't seem to be something they're necessarily thinking of.
No,
Like you
because
look
they
at
always
like,
have new stuff, so they're like, that's fine.
yeah, everything from the Queen's Gambit to the Tiger King, which got a season 2 announcement with the Tudum stuff. You just think it's like, okay, it's out of any of the streaming services or television providers or studios right now, I would say 99% of what Netflix has to offer is just disposable. Like it just doesn't hold
Have a
your attention
lasting
over a
impression.
week. Like it just kind of
I
it
agree
comes
with
and
you.
goes.
And I think they have very few things that kind of, you know, uh, stand the test of time because of that reason. And even if you look at this TUDUM event in general, it's exactly what we were just talking about. It's not like a targeted, well, we're going to do a thing about Stranger Things and let that be the focus. It's like, no, we're going to give you 100 fucking trailers and we're going to give you 40 different announcements, and they don't care if you're not interested in all of it, because if you're interested in Stranger Things, you're going to go watch the Stranger Things trailer, or if you're interested in Red Notice, you'll go watch Red Notice or whatever. And like,
Who's
so
watching
it's
The Witcher?
because other, like, working in marketing, sometimes you don't want to do that because you oversaturate it and something doesn't become the focus. Now, like, not everyone's talking about the Stranger Things teaser because there was 40 other Netflix teasers, right? Like,
Yeah.
it's sometimes you want to drop one thing and you want these things to be spread out because you want that one thing to be the focus for that period of time. Where even this Tadum event, like, I have to go back and look at what it was, because if you go, there's like 500 trailers. So it's just like, yeah, pick and choose what you're interested in and read the descriptions or whatever. But like, even that is a marketing thing, is like, oh, we're going to do one day where we give you everything, instead of going, oh, this is going to be Stranger Things week and we're going to drop the teaser on a Monday and let people kind of sit on it for a week, and then we'll do a teaser for something else next week. But like, they just produce so much stuff that if you like Adam Sandler, you got your new Adam Sandler movie. If you like,
Murder Mystery
yeah,
2.
if you like crime shows, here's your crime show. Here's this, and you'll find your shit. So they just kind of trust their audience, and it's been working. But I think that also goes back to the, dumping all episodes at one time, which is like not my favorite thing. I get people love binging. Um, to me, that makes it more disposable, or it makes me not even go back and watch things, or I'll get to it years later and just enjoy it on my own time. Like, I'll be like, oh, now I'm finally going to go back and watch, Maniac or whatever. But I don't know.
But
Like
will
it's
you?
no, probably, or it'll take me forever, and like I'll
Speaking of Kerry
finally,
Fukunaga, you know,
yeah.
with Bond coming up, right?
So, and that's the thing. Even with like filmmakers that we usually really enjoy or intrigued by their work, it's just I still had no energy to go and do that. And yeah, I don't know. Like, I'm excited for Stranger Things 4. I liked the Cowboy Bebop opening. I'm really pumped about that. Like, I don't know if I have time now to watch the original series before this new one. I know it comes out in November, so I have a little bit of time. But, whenever we get screeners and stuff, that's a show I would love to cover because I really want to watch that show. And I thought the intro was awesome. Very,
John Cho has nice hair.
he
It's good
does,
hair.
and very faithful to the original anime, right? And but like there's so much here that I'm just like, oh, I didn't even watch 90% of this. We got our first trailer for the Sandman,
The
which
Neil
I'm
Gaiman
yeah,
series. Yep.
I've never been a huge Sandman or Neil Gaiman guy,
You're
but
more of a Thomas Hayden Church kind of dude.
yeah, of course. Yeah, yep. Tiger King 2 date announcement, which is something we absolutely do not need, but it was so popular that they're like, let's give you more Carol Baskin and fuckface. It's like, I just don't need more Joe Exotic in my life. Like, I do not care. You haven't even watched the first season of that, right?
Nope.
Like, it's
And it was one of
just
the first things, like when the pandemic kind of shut everything down, that people kind of used as escapist entertainment. And I mean, that feels it was only a year, 2 years, I guess, coming up now.
yeah,
But it kind of feels like it was centuries ago, you know,
yeah.
considering like how much stuff Netflix has released since then. You know, we've gotten The Last Dance, which I think is probably their the best thing that they've worked on
Which
with
is really just
ESPN.
ESPN, and it
Yeah,
was Canadian Netflix had it, right? So it was
yeah,
just internationally they had it, and
and The Queen's Gambit, and
which you still haven't watched either, right?
no,
And
the Witcher.
I don't care about Witcher,
I don't
but I
either, but that's
tried, but
apparently popular. So,
yeah, and we got
um,
more from all of this stuff, right? We got a new clip from or new tease from Don't Look Up, which like a movie with that many stars in it and stuff you'd think would be a huge deal, right? Like any other studio would consider that their big, and I'm sure Netflix is, but it's just it feels like when you have so much other stuff, it just kind of gets buried, right?
would you like
Um,
a little bit of everything all of the time?
I think that's a perfect place to leave it. So I don't know if anything else stood out to you, Eric, but like, yeah,
No, nothing, because
um,
it just kind of felt like, to your point, like this giant bulldozer full of content just dumped it on my lawn, and I have to like clean it up and
and
like
you have to go, what do
cipher
I want
through it
to?
all.
Yeah,
Yeah, and like find the thing that it's like the gem that's, you know, under all
the
the
grain of
dirt.
rice that
Yeah.
you actually want, right? Yeah. I totally agree. And I don't want to sound like we're just shitting on Netflix because like again, I do think there is some great stuff on there, and I thought Queen's Gambit was fantastic. I
But
love
most of
Stranger
the stuff
Things
that
and
you
like
want to see, you already kind of have an idea of what's coming because you're
Cobra
following
Kai.
it outside of Netflix anyways. You know, whether it be a filmmaker, you know, like one of the things I'm looking forward to next year from them will be the Noah Baumbach movie based on the Don DeLillo novel White Noise. But I don't need Netflix to tell me that it's
Or
coming,
even
or to
Power of the Dog, right? Like
well, yeah,
it's just
power. I
like
mean, yeah, exactly. Or like even last year with Charlie Kaufman with, you know, I'm thinking of ending
and these
things. You
things
know,
will get no marketing on Netflix. You have to go
oh, none.
find it. You have to be
Dick
already be
Johnson is Dead is one
yeah.
of the best documentaries that they've ever made, and they just buried it last
Because
October.
it goes back, Eric, will come full circle. You just already have to be interested in it
Yep.
outside of it to go find it. Like you need to know through your own circles that that's coming out that day. Like Power of the Dog is not going it might be on the homepage. Maybe because Cumberbatch, like people will randomly click on it and watch 30 minutes and go, not for me, and turn it
But
off. Like,
even some of the
and
smaller stuff, like the stuff that Netflix picks up at like Sundance or Venice or any festivals that are, you know, non-English speaking films, like we'll be reviewing, you know, Seven Prisoners down the line, but there's a movie that is about human trafficking in Brazil, that's a really solid little thriller, that, you know, for the most part will be buried. And there's a number of these films. Like there's a movie called Tragic Jungle, which was released back in May or June of this year that nobody was talking about, and they just dumped it. And there's a lot of international films that end up like that. So like even like Power of the Dog, well, at least it has, Cumberbatch, and it's directed by a filmmaker who, has won the Palme d'Or and won an Oscar and is known for The Piano, where, you have some of these, international titles that are not English speaking films that will never find an audience, even if you have critics or personalities that you follow online that are telling you to see these things, or recommending you to see these things. It's so unfortunate that there's a lot of stuff that kind of gets buried, even underneath the stuff that's already hard to kind of dig through.
Ironically, we just got a press release for Netflix in Your Neighborhood, which is a Canadian Netflix Canada website, which is to show you shows that were shot in Canada or have a Canadian element
Connection.
to them. So I know they're trying to up their CanCon, which is interesting. Obviously, like some things that they have here, like Motel Makeover, which is it's so weird to me to see. I had a cottage in Sauble Beach, Ontario, when we were younger, and I know tons of people go to Sauble Beach, every year, and it's not just, but it felt like, oh, my family went to Sauble Beach, right? When you almost take ownership over something, even though
Right.
thousands and thousands of people go all the time, and
That's my destination.
yeah.
Get
So
out
it's
here.
it's so weird to see Sauble Beach in a Netflix show, right? But then they're kind of showing even the shows that don't necessarily take place in Canada, but were just shot here, like Umbrella Academy, Virgin River.
Right.
So they do interesting things, like, you can tell the Canadian team is like, oh, let's do some, like, do a thing to try to embrace our CanCon, give you some stats that, people that watch, Canadian content are more likely to travel around Canada and stuff like that and see their
Let's go to
neighborhood.
Sauble Beach to see where this show was shot.
Yeah, I mean, that's it, right? But
could you imagine if something was, see, this is the other thing I've been thinking of a lot recently with something like even like Schitt's Creek, where when it comes to American productions or Canadian productions, even and even thinking a little bit of the movie Scarborough, um, I almost think that now we have come to a point where if you were to shoot a show or a movie in the Durham region and made it the Durham region and not just some like you know American suburb or unnamed unidentified borough somewhere, um I think that it wouldn't, like, I always thought to myself that the Durham region, you always, or like, would never be a place to film. But the one movie that I can think of off the top of my head that like truly shot in Oshawa was this horrible Mark Wahlberg film from the late '90s called The Big Hit, where he plays this kind of adolescent obnoxious hitman, and a lot of that is shot in and around like near the GM Center. And
oh, is it
yeah, and if you watch that movie, like even
GM
if you
Center as in the arena or the actual plant, like
the
the
plant,
General
pardon me,
Motors
yeah,
plant? Yeah.
yeah, so like you see like a lot of those older like homes, and other than that, like it's like okay, like most
Four Brothers was shot a bit here too, wasn't it?
a little bit of it, yeah, and then like
Um,
even Denny
because
Villeneuve's
the Oshawa
Enemy, and
Generals are in a hockey game on the TV in Four Brothers, which I always thought was the weirdest thing. Yeah, Enemy. There's a hotel in there that's right off the highway in Oshawa.
yeah, and some of that also shot west of
Obviously
Toronto with
Parkwood, but Parkwood
Mississauga.
almost doesn't count. Like
Yeah, with
Parkwood's
with
its
the
own thing.
tuxedo and Billy
And
Madison and
yeah, and
Ready or Not.
the boys
Yeah.
recently, yeah.
And then you
So
have some stuff that shoots even further out east with like Stephen King's It and stuff like that. But it kind of feels like you've gotten to that point where Hollywood has recycled so much of these locations that maybe it's time that people do come out here and take advantage of that, because it's something that's not seen that often. Another
I
one
just
being
yeah.
Falling, the Viggo Mortensen movie, which also shot further out east.
I just want more stuff to take place in Toronto. Like we use it a lot as a facade for New York and other places and
Chicago
Chicago
or
and just US
Detroit.
general US city or whatever.
that,
Um
that would be amazing. It's like you see like a bird's eye view of a city, general US
yeah,
city.
somewhere in the US. I just cuz I think about that a lot cuz like I do love where we come, like where we live, and I am very like, we talk about Toronto being kind of ugly from an architecture standpoint, things like
which it
that,
is.
but
But there's
it
a lot of people that I feel like there's this certain sort of thing with Toronto type. I mean, I was born in Toronto, but there's this kind of like holier than now that nothing exists outside of Toronto, that like,
mhm.
and that's to say with like a lot of the
I
major
think anyone,
cities.
when you're from somewhere, you have that kind of feeling, and Toronto specifically, because I feel like in the last decade or 15 years or so, it's kind of gotten higher on the global scale of people paying attention to Toronto. Because I always feel like we were like that because we were the biggest Canadian city, but we were in Canada and no one really gave a shit about us. Like the Toronto Maple Leafs, people hated in the NHL, but outside of Canada, no one cared about the NHL. And then like Toronto, I felt like Drake weirdly is the one thing in the last decade or so that kind of weirdly put Toronto on a global map and people paid more attention to it.
Well, turning us into the six, right?
And then you started to see it kind of get referenced in movies and TV, and other places dropped, and Toronto became more of like a, not necessarily a vacation destination or anything like that, but I feel like I heard more people talk about Toronto as a location globally than I did before. And I just want more stuff. So much stuff shoots here that I would love something to be set here. And even weirdly, Man from Toronto, which comes out in January, was shot here, but doesn't take place in Toronto. But maybe there's a scene, because it's being shot here, that maybe there's a scene that takes place in Toronto. But then you have something like obviously Turning Red, and you're getting more Toronto filmmakers and Toronto actors and things like that
Well,
coming out of
David
the city. And
Cronenberg's
like,
always been a proponent
yeah,
of
there's,
shooting his stuff, and then
and
like
there you
thinking of
go.
Brendan Cronenberg with Possessor recently as well.
Takes place in Toronto, but not specifically, but like, if you know, essentially, like
Yeah,
all
well,
Cronenberg
I
stuff,
think like David Cronenberg, like we watched The Fly last Halloween
which
or
does
last
take place in
October,
Toronto, right?
and it's unabashed. Like it doesn't necessarily say like this takes place in Canada,
Toronto, yeah, yeah.
but most of Cronenberg's movies, not all, but most of them, are Canadian based productions that take place in Toronto, that aren't afraid to be Canadian, unless it's something like M Butterfly or A History of Violence or something like that that's specific to Japan or the American Midwest, where like Crash and Fly and The Brood and all of, and looking back at some of those movies as well is also just interesting in terms of like how the city has built itself up again, like in terms of the architecture. And like that's the other thing, like having gone to New York and coming back to Toronto and thinking like Toronto's almost like the wannabe version of New York. Like it
Oh,
wants
yeah.
so hard to be New York for Canada, but when you go to New York, you
There's a
just like,
personality that is
yeah.
kind of missing, and I feel like, the downtown core there, I think you get a lot of that in the neighborhoods of Toronto, but a lot of people who just visit the city don't really get out there, right? But
And Tiff has
um
always been a big proponent as well
and I
of,
think that has been bigger and bigger, and TIFF gets bigger and bigger every year. And I think it does put Toronto on the map on a big Hollywood scale as well, which I think is why you're seeing it, be referenced in more things. But I would just love like an action movie or a superhero movie, or because again, yeah, small Canadian productions will take place in this area. But like,
man, Alpha Flight
um,
would be amazing if it
I
if
want it so bad, dude. Like an Alpha Flight Disney Plus show, or an Alpha Flight, like even if it's like a co-production with, like, if you, God, you could make Alpha Flight like a co-production with CBC and take the piss out of all those really bad Canadian like shows on
Corner
CBC, and
Gas, but
like
in Alpha Flight
not even
form.
Corner Gas, but like, there's like random firefighter shows, or like plane like pilot shows, and like all these random cop shows that only air on like Canadian channels that are always so bad. But I feel like you could take, with Marvel Studios doing it, like I feel like they could kind of take this irreverent approach to it that's kind of poking fun at Canadian television and stuff like that, that you could make a really fun Alpha Flight show.
But
That
they would shoot it in Atlanta though. That's the thing, because
No, I
most of
hope,
Marvel's
yeah,
stuff
I
does shoot
know.
in Atlanta.
I would hate that. But you should shoot it in Ottawa and Toronto. But like, yeah, I would just love like a post-apocalyptic movie. And I know we got, there is apocalyptic movie that takes place in Toronto called Last Night, I believe. Like,
Yeah, the Don McKellar
yeah,
film,
Don
which
McKellar
again
movie,
also
yeah.
has David Cronenberg in it as
Yeah.
a character, and that is a
Um,
great little movie that in Canada it is available on Crave. But yeah, like, well, I mean, you could even look at Scott Pilgrim versus the World,
Yeah.
right? Like
Well,
that,
there's probably one of the biggest movies set
but
in
nobody
Toronto.
saw it, right? Like, it's a
Yeah.
cult film where, like, it is also interesting. Like, another great movie that I love that's also very much a cult movie is Strange Brew, you know. And Strange Brew is also a very Canadian film from, you know, the SCTV team with Bob and Doug McKenzie.
Sorry, my doorbell's going off. I'll be right back. Keep talking.
Yeah, and so with that, like, that is also unabashedly Canadian, and it has kind of built a bit of a, you know, a cult audience over the years. But there are, I mean, Canada for the most part is known probably best for comedic actors. Obviously, even thinking of, like, with Schitt's Creek with, you know, Eugene Levy and Catherine O'Hara. But you look at it now, to Matt's point, it does feel like the Drake era of Toronto has kind of put us on the map, and that with, you know, even people who kind of live outside, who were born outside of Toronto, with the Rachel McAdams and the Ryan Goslings, and, you know, even in Vancouver you have someone like Ryan Reynolds, who's probably, I guess, you know, quote unquote, is the biggest Canadian um, uh, export to the U.S. in recent memories. So there are plenty
Grabbing a
of
Coke Zero. I'll be right back.
this episode is not sponsored by Coke Zero, but Matt will be grabbing a Coke Zero. So yeah, it is interesting just thinking about, like, where Toronto is on the map, and, like, maybe even in the future we'll see more maybe American productions embracing that, because there was a time in the 70s and 80s where if an American production, or even if it was a smaller Canadian production, shot, you know, something locally, they would want to Americanize it as much as possible. Like, if you watch the original Bob Clark Black Christmas, they're overcompensating for the fact that they shot that in Toronto by putting, like, American flags everywhere. Like, they put, like, there's a scene that takes place in a police station where they put little mini American flags in a police mug full of pens, and it's just like, the only way to sell a movie like that is sort of make it neutral or non-Canadian. You know, we want to sell this in the US.
Yeah, I heard everything you were saying. Thank you for
Yeah.
vamping for a little while.
Oh, no problem.
I'm on the Wikipedia page for list of films set in Toronto, and the last one was Little Italy in 2018.
Oh my, classic.
So here's the most recent list of movies. Italy. You have Sebastian. I don't know what that is.
I don't know what that is either.
Then you have I'll go through. Oh, I'm sorting them by year. Here we go. Don't know what Zoom is. Enemy in 2013. The F Word in 2013. So,
how many of these are Frank D'Angelo movies?
I mean, 2013, a big year for movies set in Toronto. You have Picture Day,
Which is the Tatiana Maslany film.
Yeah, Take This Waltz.
Sarah Polley's movie.
Yeah, I'm not going through everything. I'm just going through some of the ones that people would maybe recognize. Scott Pilgrim versus the World.
Is
Chloe.
Sicilian Vampire on there?
I'm sure it is. The Love Guru.
Oh God, that's probably a
Just
reason why.
Yeah,
I mean, Mike Myers was very much like, you look at Wayne's World.
Bone Cop, Bad Cop.
Oh God, you look at Wayne's World and Wayne's World 2. The suburbs of those films are very much Toronto, you know, or Ontario. You know, like, even though they're still American, he's playing off of that. And yeah, The Love Guru is probably one of those movies that kind of, like, tainted Toronto a little.
Oh, absolutely. And the Toronto Maple Leafs.
No,
Jiminy
that Toronto
Glick
Maple
and
Leafs didn't need any
Lala
extra
Going
help
the
to be tainted.
distance. Yeah, there's just, like, not that much. Last Night is on here, obviously, which we talked about. Crash, Canadian Bacon.
On the Michael Moore movie with John Candy.
I'm just going through Dead Ringers, Strange Brew, which we mentioned, Videodrome.
Yeah, a lot of Cronenberg stuff.
Yeah, really. So yeah, I want that Alpha Flight series, man. I would love to write an Alpha Flight movie or show, because, like, one thing that I've always fantasized about is, like, going back, rereading.
You always fantasize about Puck.
God bless Puck. rereading all the OG Alpha Flight series and then just for fun writing something that like an Alpha Flight thing, because um I just think it's fascinating that there was this Marvel superhero team that headquarters in Ottawa and had a lot of it in Department H being like the shield of Canada and stuff like that. Like I just think, and I
It
mean
does sound very Canadian, like.
mhm. Yeah, they're just called Department H. But then there's the whole connection with Logan and Wolverine, right? Like,
Right.
I think it could be a
And
really
isn't
interesting
Wolverine
way.
supposed to? Isn't he a Canadian
Yeah, he's
character?
Canadian. He's
Yeah.
from like Alberta or something, isn't he? I
Yeah.
think like, and Logan X-Men. Yeah, I'm pretty sure. Like, because even
This one's for you, Morph.
um, I think even the character like where Weapon X was and stuff was in Canada, wasn't it? Like where he gets the adamantium and stuff like that, and he was a member of
Speaking of the
Alpha
X-Men
Flight at
movies, that
something.
also shot a lot of those early ones shot
Yeah,
in Toronto.
very, very true. All right. Let's get into a little bit of a TIFF wrap up.
Speaking of
So
Toronto,
yeah, good segue. You guys can go back and listen to or watch all of our reviews from the 2021 Toronto International Film Festival over on Untitled Movie Reviews on podcast services or on YouTube on the Untitled Movie channel. Untitled_movies is the easiest way to get to the channel on YouTube and Letterboxd and things like that. So all the reviews are up there. So we don't necessarily have to go over everything. We can go top 5, Eric. We can talk about maybe some of the movies that we didn't cover in the reviews, or just kind of how you felt about the festival as a whole this year, the experience in general, because it was a little different last year, obviously completely digital. So we did a lot of it watching it at my place. This year it was a hybrid, which I felt, I mean, to kick things off, I don't know if I mean, I loved going back and seeing stuff in person. I felt like because half of it was in person and half of it was digital, took even more of a toll on me a little bit, especially because we were taking the train in every day from outside of the city.
it's
Um,
exhausting.
and it just felt like it kind of scheduling wise was difficult because we had to fit in travel time, we had to fit in screening time, then we had to fit in recording time, and then for me editing time, and there's a gnat flying around,
And then also some sleep.
some sleep, as well as so days where we had 1 or 2 screenings in Toronto depending on when they were spread out, and we didn't have many choice, like we didn't have much choice in the screenings because we only went to go see movies that weren't showing digitally, but so that meant they only really had 1 screening. So some we'd have a screening at 10 in the morning and then have to wait until 9 at night, and then because I don't live downtown anymore, we had to kind of just, we literally sat on a gelato patio for like 7 hours one day, and Eric
But
had a
luckily
nap and
it was
like
only the one
day.
day that was
Yeah.
kind of like, sometimes you get multiple days that are like that where
I know, but usually with it all being in person, I feel like there's an energy to it where you go get something to eat, or we'd record on our phones. Remember we did the whole record on the go. I would go to the press office, I would edit the episode and throw it out when we were doing audio only.
it
I
was a
just
very
felt
man
like,
about town kind of style of
and
like,
I liked that,
on the
but
street. Yeah, no, I did too. And especially when we did kind of like the grouping of films at the
the
end of the
daily
day.
roundups, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, were fun too. And like maybe we'll go back to that when things are, because we'll have to figure out video. I mean, I think I'm hoping there's a way on my iPad or something in future tiffs where I bring a microphone and my iPhone or something like that, and we just sit together and record reviews on video, and that's how we get them up or something. But and still do it man on the street style kind of thing. But I felt like I was really worn down by like Tuesday, Wednesday, and I really felt like my movie watching slowed down in that second half of the festival when it was all at home, where the first half we did in person. And overall, I really obviously enjoyed it. It felt like an even weirder year where it felt like a shorter festival because of what I just said. Um, and we got a lot of the big stuff out of the way in that first weekend because they were screening a lot for international press and different things in that first weekend. Um, so yeah, I mean, I think as a whole, really enjoyed the festival. Obviously, you guys can check out we'll maybe go over our top 5, top 10 movies of the festival. Um,
I still have 2 more movies to watch. So
I have a
like,
couple more too, yeah.
yeah, because I
But
want to round out to 40. So,
Yeah, and I want to get to 30, so yeah, you watched a little bit more than me, which is usually the case every year where I get
but that was
uh,
even hard
um,
because there were, like, to your point with going downtown and watching a couple movies, or in that one instance, a few films in a day, and then thinking to yourself, okay, well, like, when the films that are available on the platform are released to us, we have a day, 2 days to get to them, and it's like, oh, that's plenty of time. But that time is the one thing that, as you get older, seems to just go by so quickly, that when you know you finally get to that movie that you wanted to watch, when you have that extra time, you realize that you only have 2 hours to watch a film that might be 2 hours and 20 minutes, and then you're kind of like, well, I don't want to, like, have this basically be disrupted by the film shutting down, or not being available anymore. And then, like, even, like, factors that are completely out of your control. So the day that I mean, I talked about this in our review for The Humans, but the morning that I watched that film, I was going to watch a couple other films after
but your
that, and
power went out,
but my
right?
power went out, and luckily Tim Hortons was the saving grace there, in terms of because you can't, you have to use Wi-Fi to get onto this platform. So, and it was a struggle to watch, like, the last, like, 20 minutes of that movie, even less. And so I was just like, I don't want to, like, frustrate myself watching a film that I want to give the best opportunity and chance possible. So then, there was like 2 or 3 movies that day that were sacrificed because of that. Not saying, like, I mean, in total, when I'm all said and done, 40 movies is a lot of movies.
It's a shit
Um,
ton. I'm
yeah,
surprised you
and
got to that
but
number.
even like, we were lucky to you know
Pre-screen and
pre-screen a few things, even
Sundance.
though, yeah, even though there's some stuff that, like, we probably would have seen more if it was a normal year in terms of the pre-screening stuff. But we tried to watch as much as we can. But it was just, when you're looking at the festival as it before it begins, we're always like this. It's always one of those things where your eyes are bigger than your stomach, kind of
Oh
thing,
yeah.
where you're looking at it's like, I'm gonna watch this and this, and I'm gonna see like 5 movies
But
that
by day
day.
4, you're like, ugh. I had one 6-movie day, which was wild, which I haven't
Right.
done in
Now,
a while.
most of those were at home, though, right? Or all of them
That
were at
six
home.
movie day? No, I think
Yeah,
we did a couple in person, then I came home and watched a bunch more.
right.
I
Where
feel like
sometimes you're also in a groove, right? Where, like, you can, like, you just kind of want to keep going, and then sometimes there are some movies where, like, I know you like one movie that you didn't dislike, but maybe you weren't in the right headspace for, was Earwig, which is a
yeah.
movie, the more I think about is the more I really love the visuals and the aesthetic. It looks like a kind of horror film,
I
but
had
it's
to be
also
true to myself at that moment and just go, I
right.
can't do this right now.
But it's also a very demanding movie. Like, I feel like it's also, like, it takes about 20 minutes for anybody to start speaking. It's from the director of Evolution, which also played Tiff a few years ago. But if you're not in the mood for, like, a Hammer horror silent movie era esque homage, where the lead looks a lot like Colin Clive from the Universal Frankenstein movies, you're not going to be vibing with it. And sometimes you need to kind of be like, okay, it's just not working for me right now. Like, if you're watching 2 or 3 films in the day and it's your second or third movie, like, I can't fathom somebody going into Memoria like at 8 a.m. in the morning and being like, unless
After
you're,
sleeping a couple hours or
yeah,
something, yeah.
and having the patience for it, and it's not the movie's fault necessarily, or even the viewer's fault. It's just how these things are scheduled,
Yeah.
which sometimes it's like, okay, maybe you can go back to it afterwards. And there's some movies on here where it's like, I watched everything, and there are some films where, like, again, Earwig, I gave it a 3 out of 5, but the more I think about it, the more I like it, and I would like to rewatch it again. And whenever it gets picked up, it'll probably be an IFC film, or some sort of genre label, maybe Magnet from Magnolia will pick it up. I'll watch it again and I'll like it even more. But that happens even with, you know, filmmakers that you like, that maybe have a very sort of hard edge to them. I just feel like when it comes to programming, you have to look at programming and scheduling as two different things.
Yeah.
When it comes to programming, you're looking at, like, what the people that work at TIFF are doing, and then you have to kind of think, like, okay, well, what am I watching in this buffet of films? You're selecting a little bit of this, a little bit of that. and not all these things pair well together. So you watch a movie that you're on this like incredible high after watching. Like I remember when we came out of Pablo Larraín's Jackie, and just
Mhm,
being
mhm,
on that kind of like adrenaline rush of watching like
mhm.
a great movie. And then afterwards I think we had another screening, and just maybe, maybe there was some goodwill to that other film, or maybe there wasn't, because the expectations now were so high, and vice versa, where you watch a film that you really don't like, and then that kind of sours your mood for the rest of the
Yeah, or
day.
you're not in a mood to watch something else, and that's why you'll go, I'm not gonna go to my next thing because that took everything out of me,
I'm
or
tapping out.
and it could go the other way, like you said, you love something so much that you almost don't want to watch something else because nothing will be as good as what you just watched. Not to put something on a pedestal or something like that, but you're coming off that high where if a movie doesn't kind of land with you right away, it's a bit tougher. So, and especially on this hybrid year, like I can't wait to get back to the normal festival where it's just like it's more exhausting, but it's got an energy to it and you keep yourself going. Cause I feel like once you get home and you sit down and you're in
You
your
crash.
you're in your home, right? And you're just like, whew, I don't know if I got it right now. I just took the train home. Eric and I recorded for a couple hours because we had to do the reviews, and like, I
But
don't know if I have
overall,
the
I
energy.
have to say, like, we put in a lot of work especially on your end, put in a lot of work when it came to covering a variety of movies. Even though, yeah, it's only a handful of films that we did individual reviews for. They vary from
Uh,
Memoria to Dune and everything in between. Like we
yeah.
gave everything a shot. Like it wasn't like we were focused on like, okay, we have to get only the
Dune,
films
Dear
that are
Evan
gonna.
Hansen, Tammy Faye, like the bigger
Yeah.
quote unquote movies or whatever, The Guilty and Last Night in Soho. Like we tried to have a good eclectic mix of stuff. And I still think we put out a good amount of reviews because I just feel like I saw 26 movies so far, 27 if you count Earwig, but I only saw the first half hour. So I don't really necessarily officially count it, but it's 27. You did close to 30,
Yep.
or 40, sorry.
40. I'm
I
on
did close
let me
to,
look right now. 38.
yeah, and I'm on 27. And we covered the majority of those in individual reviews, I think. I think there was only a couple out of that 27 where we don't have a individual review for it on my end, and yours is a bit more. So I think like overall it was a successful festival and it is still my favorite time of the year. I'm looking forward to the day where we can go back and mix of press and industry screenings, a mix of screenings at Princess of Wales and Elgin and Roy Thompson Hall and things like that. Like I love that energy of the festival where you leave your house at 8 a.m. and you don't get back until 9 p.m. sometimes later if you're going to a midnight or if you're seeing a
But
late
also staying
movie.
downtown as well, right? Like, because I
Yeah.
think that commute going back and forth, if you only have a couple movies a day, yes, it still is going to exhaust you. But we were being practical in terms of deciding to not rent an Airbnb
Yeah, it
or
didn't make
stay
sense,
somewhere.
right?
But
Like,
if you are doing 5 or 6 movies a day, um I can't not recommend, you have to stay in the city. You can't
oh
you
yeah,
can't like you,
take the
or at least
train in, yeah.
close to it. Like it's so difficult to commute 45 to 50 minutes or
That's
further
not even
back and
including
forth.
the drive and getting to yeah,
Yeah.
there's so much more on top of that too. So yeah, it does take a weird toll on you, even though you're just sitting on a train or whatever.
And if you have an 8 a.m. screening, you got to wake up at like 5 or 6.
Yeah, it
Well,
is
if you're picking,
ridiculous.
if you are also picking somebody
Yeah,
else's up,
you're
right?
carpooling, things
Yeah.
like that. Yeah, there's a lot that goes into it, but I'm looking forward to the day of getting back to TIFF. Even though I've enjoyed the last 2 years, I think they've done a really good job at um, you know, doing a full digital festival, doing a hybrid festival. Well, not full digital. They did the drive-in screenings and lawn screenings 2 years ago, but um and then from a safety standpoint, which is the one thing we haven't really talked about, like I did think they did a pretty good job. We will be transparent, say we did get an email that said, hey, someone tested positive at your Dune screening that you attended to, which gave us a little bit of anxiety, I would say. But we reached out to TIFF and we said, hey, can we get some more details? Like, were they sitting close to us? Were they in our row? They would have had to pass us. And they were like, no, both you and Eric weren't sitting close to this person. And obviously we're fine. It's many weeks. It's a week and almost 2 weeks after we've seen Dune. So, but I think they did a good job of checking, vaccinations or
Well, especially at the
tests.
Scotia Bank Theater
They
where
checked your
they
ID with
ID,
it.
yeah.
Yeah, where TIFF Lightbox they didn't, but they didn't check your ID. So, and it's still, I think, would be fairly easy to just show them something and show your ID. Like, I don't think they're not verifying anything or whatever, but other than that, but I felt pretty safe other than like I tweeted out that first day of like people were closer to me than I would have liked. They were doing 50% kind of every other seat where I would have liked a little less than that, but
Well,
it
especially
is
at
what
that
it is.
hero screening, right, where the critics, that it was a P&I screening, and the press and industry were all clustered in sort of like the front main rows, and there was plenty of space where you could have spread out people even more to keep it safe.
But the way that they did the tickets, they just put everyone at the front and it was bizarre. But other than that, I felt mostly safe, but very much looking forward to getting back to the festival as normal. So Eric, we can talk about a couple of the movies we didn't review. So you guys can check out, like, I'll list all of our reviews right now, at least on my end, that you guys can check out. You guys can check out on Untitled Movie Reviews, and right here on YouTube, you can check out our reviews for Petite Maman, The Humans, Spencer, T10, Scarborough, The Rescue, Last Night in Soho, Memoria, The Power of the Dog, Belfast, the Kafka re-edit, Mr. Neff, uh, The Guilty, Electrical Life of Louis Wayne, Jockey, which is a Sundance review. You'll have to go back. Charlotte, Night Raiders, A Hero, Dune, The Eyes of Tammy Faye, Wolf, Dear Evan Hansen.
Flea, which is also Sundance.
Flea, but Flea we didn't do an individual review for. You talked about it on our
Oh,
Sundance
right,
wrap up.
right.
So maybe when Flea comes out, we
We'll
will
do a
actually
review.
review, because I would love to rewatch Flea. And I didn't catch it at this festival again. Um, so yeah, tons of reviews that you guys can go check out. We put out hours and hours of content, so you guys can go back and check those out. So we won't necessarily cover those. Maybe we'll talk about our favorites of the festival. Eric, I only saw a couple movies, or I think one movie that you didn't see, which is Marina, which is a Croatian set movie that I watched with Nevis on our anniversary. Obviously watching it with Nevis because it is her homeland. Try to kind of catch anything from Croatia with her. And basically, I considered it a very kind of chill, kind of ocean set or sea set jailbreak movie about a patriarchy and this girl trying to escape her kind of controlling father. And I thought it was a good coming of age movie. I thought it was, nothing super, as Georgie walks by, as you probably saw that.
Well, we also did see the Electrical Life of Louis Wayne. So
And Georgie made a cameo in that as well. Georgie wants to go up into the window, so I'm trying to help her out. But really enjoyed Marina, and I hope it kind of gets an audience, because I thought it was a really solid little coming of age movie.
well, it's executive produced by Martin Scorsese,
Yeah,
and
so
it
you'd
has
think
Cliff
that.
Curtis in it as well.
Yeah, yeah. There's a good point, Eric. The cast is great. I thought the young woman who played the lead was quite good. But Cliff Curtis, who always I love seeing pop up in random things, and he's always kind of, to me, like a chameleon, that he just kind of pops up and can play any role, and I feel like he's always good. So I really enjoyed Marina, and I hope you check it out, Eric, whenever it comes out, because it is quite good. And I think that's really the only thing that I saw that you didn't see.
Yeah.
Um,
Well, I keeping in paired with overbearing and controlling Eastern European patriarchs,
sure, yeah.
a film that I saw called Unclenching the Fist, which is going to be released through Mubi in North America, is a film about a young girl who lives in a former mining town, who, when you're first introduced to the character, you feel that she's acting a little bit aloof and quote unquote difficult, because she's trying to avoid, this guy who's making advances on her. But then she starts acting very childish, and it becomes almost grating. But then you
Okay.
find out that her father, who is her sole caretaker, she's an adult now, but she lives with her father and her brother in this small sort of former mining town that's just kind of a desolate wasteland almost. She works at this kind of convenience store that also sells shoes. But you find out through the family dynamic that her father has always treated her like a child, and hence she's never been able to properly grow up, and to the point
Sounds like
where
Marina a little bit.
yeah, where like I don't know if this is spoiler or not, but like she's even like still wearing diapers and things like that, and it's like
Okay.
it's
Not
really
doesn't go
yeah,
that far on
yeah,
this
and
side,
it's
but
and like so this other brother comes into the picture later on, and he kind of left to go live in the major city, and he's trying to kind of help her, but not, because he also kind of still feels some allegiance to the father, and everybody is trying to maybe cut ties with the dad but are still kind of invested in it. And then the other brother, there's this weird kind of like, it's not incestual, but like it's there's something inappropriate about it, where like the younger brother wants to sleep in the same bed as the sister, and like the sister doesn't want that, so like there is this kind of autonomy that the sister does want, and she's fighting that. And a lot of the cast are non-professional actors, but they're all really really good. So it was fascinating to watch that movie and sort of like have this prejudgment of a character that you think is going to be um a little bit kind of grating in some ways, but then you learn why she is the way she is. And you become more empathetic towards her as the story goes on. And it's not a great movie per se, but it's one that isn't completely like, when you think of a lot of like Eastern European films that take place in and around and outside of Russia, you think that they're going to be quite bleak. There is a bleakness to this, but there's also kind of like a glimmer of hope that makes the movie maybe not accessible, but at least not completely a downer. And I think that that's why Unclenching the Fist is definitely worth checking out.
cool.
And yeah, and then a movie we both actually saw that we didn't review was the documentary about Julia Childs called Julia,
Mhm.
which is kind of your classic sort of bio documentary about a famous person. And we've been watching a lot of we've been covering a lot of documentaries about chefs, specifically within in this last
Wolfgang.
year, and
Yeah.
Roadrunner about Anthony
Yeah.
Bourdain. And this almost is like a weird kind of combination of the two in terms of Julia Child. Kind of, it goes over America in the 1950s and early 60s, before you know looking at food as like microwavable consumption, and just kind of
American
being
food was really gross, kind of.
yes,
Yeah.
yeah, it was all like gelatin and like again, like
Frozen foods. Yeah.
frozen food, and it wasn't looked at as like not only food to just consume and kind of get the calories, but actually enjoy. And
Mhm.
so Julia Child, a lot of that's covered also in Wolfgang. Julia Child was kind of like the one who, after spending time in Europe and in Asia,
In
comes back.
France, right?
Yeah, Europe, France specifically, but also in Asia. um Comes back and basically creates the persona of the TV chef, and introduces culinary um, tips and tricks that makes food fun and exciting and romanticizes it. And we also learn about her relationship with her husband Paul. And again, it goes by the books, but I think what I liked a lot about this movie, and I think it also kind of plays into, it was just something nice to kind of be peppered into some more darker or more dramatic things, is having something that was kind of weirdly just fun and enjoyable, and also kind of a reminder of how important Julia Child was. Because you
Oh yeah.
have Wolfgang, and Wolfgang does the same thing, where you have like at the beginning you have all these talking head interviews saying like Wolfgang Puck was the guy that like redefined food, he was the first. And then with Bourdain, you have a lot of people saying, well, he was the guy that made world travel and international cuisine sort of palatable to US audiences. And it's like, well, yeah, no, those guys did great work, but Julia Child is really the first to do that. She's the
Mhm.
monarch of
Kind of a
the
triforce
foodist.
of those three, which makes sense why they're all getting docs this year, right?
Yeah.
Like, I feel like those three people are very influential, but yeah, Julia Child being the first, and then kind of Wolfgang Puck coming off the coattails of her, and then yeah, I enjoyed it too. I just didn't when we discussed it, we were in the middle of putting out so much content where I'm just like, Eric, I liked the movie. I think it is a perfectly enjoyable. Georgie, what are you doing? Stop. What are you doing? Come on. There's like a fly or something, so she's going off. I just didn't have much to say. Like, I think it was a pretty solid and enjoyable reminder of how influential she was in a pretty by the books documentary. Like, I think that, it ended up right in the middle of my TIFF rankings because of that, because I thought it was perfectly enjoyable. It's better than that lower tier of movies that I saw at the fest, but I also didn't have much excitement or much to say about it. So I was just like, I thought it was thoroughly enjoyable, and I don't have much more to say, but
Yeah,
yeah.
which I don't disagree with you on that. Like, I think it's one of those films where, like, over time it'll fade, but it just kind of hit that sweet spot
And
for
I think
me
that's totally fine too. Yeah,
where,
like that
like,
makes
watching
sense.
her kind of break the glass ceiling
Yeah.
and sort of, you know, watching those first couple episodes of the French Chef and looking at how fully formed her broadcast persona was
Yeah.
already, like she and also being a woman in her 50s
Yeah.
and basically reinventing herself. Like, it's just something like even now is really kind of a rarity and unfortunate for women in media, whether it be film, television, news reporting, basically any kind of programming that's on camera. And just thinking about, like, how kind of revolutionary she was and how much of a trailblazer she was, and she kind of set the mold, but at the same time, a lot of things haven't kind of progressed or
No.
gotten better or sort of gone above what Julia Child was able to do. And so that was something that I found just an important reminder. But I also just really loved the food and the culture and sort of an American kind of becoming almost like, a weird sort of um an American expat becoming a French adoptee in a weird way, and sort of her sort of taking a lot of sort of culinary cues from France, and sort of seeing both the Julia Child that everybody knew and loved on screen, but also the savvy businesswoman that she was, and seeing like not everything was always sort of flowery and just enjoyable. So yeah, I again, like, is it as good as something or as thrilling viscerally thrilling as The Rescue? No. But if it's something that you're kind of looking for to kind of just, like, take a breather
It's
between
an
some
easy
of the,
watch. Yeah.
yeah, it's an enjoyable movie. And I think that if you're into cooking specifically, you have to kind of watch something like this,
Oh,
because
totally.
you're
Yeah.
paying tribute to the person who really started this whole phase of the cookbook and sort of the
Mhm.
online or on camera persona of chefs.
Yeah, absolutely. Rapid fire, other stuff that you kind of liked or disliked that I didn't watch with you.
Yeah, so I'm just looking at the list now on Letterbox. I have a review on Rogers for "I'm Your Man," which I really
Right, I do
liked
want to
quite a bit
watch
with Dan
Nevis.
Stevens.
Yeah, Nevis loves Dan Stevens,
He's
and
very good in this.
I know it's already out, right?
Yes. No,
Oh,
it's out in the US,
okay.
but in Canada it's only playing in select
Oh, right, and
theaters
not in
outside
Toronto,
of
right?
Toronto. Yes, and not
Yeah.
even in Durham. But it'll be available on VOD October 12th.
Okay, so not too
Um,
long. Yeah.
no, no, no. A couple movies that I saw that we'll talk more about. Seven Prisoners. I watched the Ari Folman animated Anne Frank doc, or it's not really a doc, but it's kind of a hybrid of both documentary
A
and
biopic kind of thing.
fictional
Yeah.
biopic that's sort of focused on Anne's imaginary best friend that she wrote to in her diary, Kitty, Where is Anne Frank, where the character kind of comes out of the diary in the modern world and sees sort of the influence that Anne Frank has had on the world, and is also kind of looking at how, some things don't change, and that even though, yes, the oppressive regime of, Nazi Germany is gone and looked upon as this horrible moment in history, and as it should be in retrospective, which it wasn't at the time. And that's another point that the movie does make. um, it looks at like how, a lot of refugees in, third world countries are struggling to survive and trying to kind of make it into other countries, or being deported and sent back, and sort of making that kind of connection. It reminded me a little bit of, I mean, I really love Ari Folman's Waltz with Bashir quite a bit, and it kind of reminded me a little bit of like almost like a Don Bluth animated film, the guy who did American Tail and
Oh,
Secret of
okay.
Nim, where
Cool.
like it has that kind of quality to it, where it's not really a children's movie and it's not necessarily an adult film. It's one of those interesting transitional movies that, like, it's been made mostly to play at schools and sort of get back to the reasoning of who Anne Frank is, to kind of cut through the weird sort of merchandising and sort of, creating this weird like tribute to somebody who nobody saved at the time. And like it's just it would be an interesting conversation to have when we do a review of Bergman Island, in terms of
Okay.
like how we take certain historical figures and we weirdly commercialize them by paying tribute to them,
Right.
specifically when it is region specific, or sort of like an area that they're kind of they lived in or are known for, whether it be Faro Island, or in this case in Amsterdam. But it also made me think, like, there's a scene early on where you have people visiting the Anne Frank home, and you see like all these tourists coming in, cycling through the day, and it just reminded me of that horribly offensive moment in The Fault in Our Stars, where you have Ansel Elgort and Shailene Woodley characters in that kiss for the first time in the
The
Anne
Anne
Frank
Frank house.
museum slash house. And it just was like like, I actually really like Where is Anne Frank is divisive, but I found it to be I was mixed positive overall. But like, it made me think of that scene for some weird reason, and like how American movies handle sort of moments like that. Like even also in
Right.
X-Men Apocalypse.
With the Auschwitz kind of like,
Yeah,
is it? Yeah.
and it's just like, ugh, where this I think is actually saying something kind of about some of that stuff, in terms of like, again, how we've turned it into a tourist destination for the wrong
Yeah.
reasons.
And when you have someone in a purple jumpsuit there, it's just like in like you're in a superhero movie in a popcorn entertainment, it just kind of comes across as icky. Yeah, I get that.
Yeah. So going through these quickly, I watched Montana Story, which is sort of this estranged brother sister getting back together in the Midwest after their father is in a horrible accident and is basically in a coma that he's not going to recover from. And the son, played by Owen Teague, who's probably best known as playing Henry Bowers in Stephen King's It,
Oh,
the remakes. Um, is basically having to come in and sort of uh, get all of the dad's affairs in order. And then his sister shows up, who's played by Haley Lou Richardson, and you find out about their problematic sort of upbringing with a father that was very abusive, and sort of what it means to take care of somebody who maybe doesn't deserve to be treated in the same respect, considering what he's done in the past. And sort of the brother and sister also kind of dealing with a moment in their lives that the brother maybe should have been more supportive of, done something to help the sister who had a really tumultuous relationship with her father. Really beautiful performances, extremely understated. Maybe not the greatest film to watch near the end of the festival, because it is paced in a very deliberate kind of slow and methodical and melancholy kind of way. But it's a film that I think the two leads are really good. And also, like, there's this whole thing with like them deciding what to do with this older horse that they have, and named Mr. T. And overall, just a kind of really kind of sweet but thoughtful sort of look at sort of the dysfunctional qualities of family, and being accountable, but also finding, the courage to forgive somebody.
Yeah.
And I'm speaking more from the sister and the brother perspective than anything else. So yeah, that wasn't that bad. It was, again, a very kind of middle of the road but not awful film. Then I watched some stuff that wasn't as good, that I'll talk more about, like Snakehead, when we do our review for Seven Prisoners, because it also deals with human trafficking, and I feel that movie does not get across what it intends to, because it's thinking it's a bigger film than what it actually is.
Right.
And it ultimately felt like the one movie that I didn't see Lakewood, the Philip Noyce movie, and I know a lot of people were saying that it kind of felt like a VOD film, but, and I mean like a trash VOD movie, and Snakehead kind of feels like that kind of like bottom barrel kind of movie, unfortunately. I watched Encounter with Riz Ahmed, who's very good as a father who basically kidnaps his two sons and goes on the road, believing that aliens have infected other human beings. Riz Ahmed is okay. The movie feels a little bit underdeveloped overall, especially when considering another movie kind of does something similar to that I felt was better, which was William Friedkin's Bug, in terms of creating a
I'd like to
psychological
rewatch
sort
that. I
of
haven't seen it in a long
drama.
time.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's on Amazon Prime. It's never gotten a Blu-ray release, unfortunately, with Michael Shannon and Ashley Judd. I watched another Midnight Madness movie called You Are Not My Mother, which I think I had higher expectations going in, so I was ultimately let down by this movie. I think it's fine, but it's basically taking this Irish sort of folklore approach to Halloween, and surrounding this young girl whose mother vanishes, then comes back and is completely different. It kind of deals with clinical depression and sort of an invasion of the body snatcher style story, also harkening back to the Changeling, if you know what, not the movie, but like the mythology of the Changeling. There's stuff in there that I think is interesting, but overall, narratively speaking, I think it doesn't sort of tie together completely. And then I will finish off, because I did see a lot. I won't talk about The Starling because I just watched that on Netflix, but oh boy, that movie is
Oh,
not
you did
good.
watch it on Netflix just because
Yeah,
you want to get those TIFF totals up?
yeah.
Yeah.
So Dash Cam, which is a film
Oh yeah,
that,
we both watched for the most part.
yes, I watched the whole thing. I think,
I
Matt, you
got,
got motion sickness halfway through,
yeah, like
or
three
just wasn't
quarters,
feeling it.
both.
Yeah.
It was the only movie I felt was unwatchable at the festival. And like Earwig was a movie I left because I was not in the right headspace. That
Not
wasn't
because of the
necessarily,
filmmaking.
not necessarily, no. Where Dash Cam was a one that I was watching at home, and I got an hour, not even an hour into it, because it's only 66 minutes, right?
But it feels
Uh
like an eternity.
it does. And I think, I got over half, but I was in the end game of the movie, and I was like, I don't need to see the rest of this. What am I doing? I'm like, I really hate this. Like, I hate this. And I'm like, I liked Host a lot. Like, I caught up with
Yeah, so
Host
this is
during
Rob Savage's follow up. He signed a deal after Host
with
played, or was picked up
Blumhouse.
by,
Yeah.
yeah, Shudder, and so this is kind of like the first of his films, and it's another
Also a
kind of,
Screen Life kind of,
yeah,
this one
found
being,
footage-esque story from the guise of a real, like an actual personality, Anne Hardy, who is a very polarizing individual in general. But the person that we're watching is basically someone that is going to probably turn off most people. And I think we've talked about this before, where we don't mind sort of complicated or
protagonist. Yeah.
ugly protagonists, in the sense of that, like, if a character is interesting, they don't have to be likable. But when you compile that or compound that with an unlikable character and really shoddy handheld camera work, it really does start to grate on you, to the point where um that 65, 66 minutes does feel like an eternity. And then even more so, the filmmaking does feel almost incompetent. Like, it just kind of feels like this idea was not really fully developed past the idea. It's like, okay, let's put, like this um uh non PC personality in front of the camera, and that is part of it. Like, they didn't really have a script, they just gave kind of situations out and see where it goes, and ultimately just really, in my opinion, does not come together.
No, and I agree with that. And it was making me feel nauseous. I just felt like um I'm fine with not enjoying a protagonist of a movie, even though like I'm fine. Like sometimes you just want to cheer for someone to die. You're like, I hate this person, I hope they do get what's coming to them. And that can be enjoyable, but it was so grating, both the lead and the filmmaking, to the point where I got 40 minutes into it, knew there was only about 20 minutes left, and I was like, man, this is only 66 minutes, but it feels like 600 minutes. And I was like, I can't, I just don't need to finish this. Like, I know where it's going. The scares, like some of the, you know, the editing techniques, I could, you see the filmmaking, you're like, I get it. I'm all for screen life movies. I think they can be really, really cool. And I think something about someone like Twitch streaming their life and some fucked up stuff happening to them could be really cool. But I get that she's not going to run around with a gimbal and like have steady cam and stuff like that. Like, I get she's just shooting on her iPhone or a GoPro or whatever she's using to stream, attaching it to a hat. The new iPhones just came out that have a stabilizer in all of the phones. But the phone she was using did not, and they don't do anything to compensate for that. And it's unabashedly like, oh, here's an amateur recording all of this stuff, where when you can get away with webcams in host and some cell phone footage, but um it was just it's so much shaky cam to the point where you're like, it's just, I can't watch this anymore. And like, it was the only thing that was so obnoxious to me that I'm like, I gotta shut this shit off. I just like, I can't finish this. I've seen enough. This is the worst thing that I saw at the festival. And that's saying something, because we watched Dear Evan Hansen and and stuff like that. But I just like, this was the thing that was borderline like, this shouldn't have been released. And like, I know that's very harsh, but like, and it seems some people dig it, but like, I'm fine with you making. I get that it's supposed to be real life and it's someone who's not necessarily making a movie, but I need it to be watchable, and I felt like it was unwatchable the way that it was shot, to the point where I'm like, I don't want to watch any more of this, so I shut it off. But
Yeah,
yeah.
to call it esoteric is being generous. It's just really weirdly incompetent and just underdeveloped. Like, again, I like the idea of sticking a personality in a genre, or if like a character, like a, whether they be a real life personality or a fictional personality stumbling into a genre of film that you're not expecting them to, or a style that is different from what they're used to. Like, I weirdly, when I was watching this, I weirdly thought of that horrible Crocodile Hunter movie where Steve Irwin, had that moments in the early 2000s where he was so popular that he got to be in almost like his own James Bond movie,
Yeah.
where the crocodile, it was like Collision Course or something like
Yeah,
that. And like,
sure. Yeah.
I was thinking of that, or even like Howard Stern doing
Private Parts. Yeah.
Private Parts, which is his own biography, but or autobiography, but it turns almost into like a romantic comedy at times. Like, it's like, those kind of movies are kind of intriguing depending on if the personality works within the setting, and if the story around them is sort of interesting enough. And again, I like the screen life movies, as you mentioned. Like, we've reviewed a number of them. We've talked about Host. We
I
both liked Host for what it was.
Mhm.
But it almost feels like, any of the goodwill that Rob Savage sort of garnered with Host was basically
Oh,
sullied here.
yeah, I agree. Like, I after Host, I'd be like, hell yeah, interested in what Rob Savage is doing. After this, I'm like, you gotta show me a trailer first, maybe, or something. Like, there could have been a different approach here that I think could have worked. You could have taken like a Jake Paul kind of character, like a YouTuber, and kind of done it that way, and still been someone that is not PC, or you don't really enjoy, them as a human, but put them in a genre situation, like you're saying, where I felt like in this, it almost used it as an excuse to be really cheap or a way to mask, the cheapness or the effects of everything, where, okay, let's just shake the cam a lot and we can kind of do some editing in there that will make some camera tricks or something seem scarier than it is, because we kind of have to, use the shaky cam and you not really being able to tell what's happening, as a way for some of the scares or some of the grossness or some of the whatever of it. And it just ends up looking really cheap. And I don't know. I think there could have been a way where if you made the lead character more of a content creator, like on YouTube or Twitch or something like that, and they knew how to shoot things and not just be this very, like cash cab wrapping kind of, here's a dash. Like, again, there's not even a dash cam in the movie. Someone pointed out, being like, a dash cam is something you have pointed forward on your car, where everything is like her. I guess it's still sort of a dash cam because it's pointing at her and she's like doing this rapping thing.
Well, I thought it was going to be a film about police
Freestyling.
corruption. Like,
Yeah,
I thought it was
yeah.
going to be, because there's another movie that's kind of like that a little bit with Mary J. Blige that's available on Amazon Prime, called Body Cam, which
Yes,
kind of
yeah.
does the same thing, but it's again from the point of view of like, police body cam. So I was thinking dash cam was going to
But
be
there
like
could
a
have been
horror
something
movie.
intriguing there, right? Playing
Yeah.
with the cops. But like, I don't know. I think if you would have made the character a little bit more competent with how they are good at using cameras and stuff like that, it could have been more watchable. Where
Or
I
just
just felt like,
inventive or clever with
yeah,
some of the Twitch stream Snapchat-esque kind of video footage. Like it's never really prominent when shit hits the fan. Like it kind of, it feels like, okay, they set it up to kind of have that, but then they never really play with it in a way that I mean, yeah, Profile is a movie that is very trashy and maybe somewhat problematic, but it's also still kind of inventive and using the medium to its full extent. And a lot of these Screen Life films, especially within the horror genre, have been pretty adaptable and adept at sort of taking full advantage of using a
the
computer
different, and
as
your phone and all the different devices and things like that.
this doesn't. This
Even
kind of forgets
searching,
about
right?
that.
Like searching, I think is even not a horror movie, but is
But it's still
as
genre.
as a procedural or a mystery or something like that. Like, it actually is very effective in the way that it uses, different computers and different OS systems and different cameras and different security mixed with iPhones and mixed with computers. And like, I just feel like this was just so one note and it was just so awful. And it's like, okay, yeah, we'll literally let you use the camera and whatever you get is what we're going to use. And it's just, I don't know. We're spending way too much time on it, but I think it was because it was probably the worst thing each of us saw or close to it.
It was my second. Nothing's gonna top
You
Dear Evan
didn't.
Hansen.
Okay. See, I had to put it below because, like, at least Dear Evan Hansen for me, I can kind of poke fun at and like laugh at while I'm watching it a little bit and just be baffled by it. Where this, I felt like was almost,
See, if we
like,
were to put Ben
unwatchable.
Platt in the lead role as Dear Evan Hansen in Dashcam, now we're talking.
Just combine the two.
That's
worst
a movie. That
the
is
two
a
worst
movie right
movies.
there.
The two worst movies we saw, just combine them into one, and now you're on to something, Eric. But overall,
I have a feeling. I just
obviously,
want to say one last thing with this. I have a feeling that this movie, like, so Amazon's doing this thing now where like they're scraping the bottom of the barrel with Blumhouse films
yeah.
that don't get distribution in terms of like whether they're streaming.
Hey Jason,
or...
what stuff can you not get sold anywhere
Bingo
else?
hell. Okay, we'll basically. I mean, we saw actually one of those films a few
At
years
TIFF
ago,
a
The
couple
Lie.
years ago, yeah.
Yeah, and
which was
and that
very
actually, yeah, and that became a part of, also shot in Toronto.
Welcome to the Blumhouse.
Yeah, and so now every year they're doing that where they're packaging at least
in October, yeah.
4 movies. It seems to be an annual event now. This is the second year. I wouldn't be surprised if Dashcam ends up being a part of next year's grouping of films.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised at
Bingo
that,
Hell
actually.
2 and Dashcam.
Great. Overall, I love TIFF. Can't wait for next year. And we'll see what other festivals we'll be covering. We'll see if they continue kind of the digital element for some of them. I'm hoping we can cover Sundance again. I'm hoping, some of the festivals continue that digital side, even if the selection is a little bit limited for international
But also the
press and
leaking,
stuff.
though. Now, I mean, we
I
didn't really
know.
talk about that with The Power of the Dog and The Guilty.
A couple Netflix movies got leaked,
which
so
is the weirdest ones to think about. Like, if you're gonna leak anything online, like, those movies are eventually going to stream anyways, and it's almost like what was the thinking process between whoever
I
did
don't know.
that?
Who knows? So I'm excited. Love the festival. Eric, quickly, we don't have to talk about, but let's go through our top tens. Mine,
Tense. All
let's
right.
do just 10 to 1. Honorable mention for me for Belfast and Power of the Dog, but didn't quite make my top 10. But my top 10 of TIFF 2021 at number 10, Memoria. Number 9, Last Night in Soho. Number 8, The Rescue. Number 7, Marina. Number 6, Scarborough. Number 5, T10. Number 4, coming in right at the end of the festival, Bergman Island, which we will review when it comes out. Number 3, Spencer. Number 2, The Humans. And number 1, Petite Maman. Quickly, I think Petite Maman and The Humans, I think, are in that upper class of movies I fell in love with at the festival, and I really, really love both of those movies. And I think everything under that, from 3 to 10, I either really enjoyed or enjoyed quite a bit. But those top 2 movies are the ones that I will remember for a long time, that I really, really enjoyed both of those experiences a lot.
Yeah, I mean that's a good list. And then a couple honorable mentions that didn't maybe make the cut. I'm Your Man and Spencer, which I thought were solid, but maybe things about them just didn't make that list. But again, it is what it is.
You can get our full list on Letterboxd too, everyone.
Yeah. So number 10 is Mr. Neff. That name again is Mr. Neff.
Honorable mention to that too. A really fun experience. I just didn't quite make my top 10.
Number 9 is Scarborough. Number 8 is A Hero. Number 7 is The Rescue. Number 6 is Memoria. Number 5 is Flea. Number 4 is T10. Number 3 is The Power of the Dog. And coming in the top 2 spots, Petite Mama, number 2, and number 1, Bergman Island.
Oh my god, it passed it. Wow, that was a twist for me. I didn't know.
I've been thinking a lot about Bergman Island since watching it. It's
wow, I'm excited to do that review now. I'm
barrowed into my mind.
I saw.
I love both.
Yeah.
I think again, they're interchangeable.
Yeah.
It just depends on the day. Like I think in most days I will choose a film that's 70 plus minutes.
Yeah.
But there's things about Bergman Island that are really worth dissecting the layers of.
What a twist.
But again, I'm not doing it to be like,
it was a huge pleasant surprise to me too. It's
Yeah.
in my top 5, which I was not necessarily expecting. And I saw where you originally rated it and where you originally put it, but it's very cool to see that it passed, even though I love Petite Maman. Like, it's cool that you have it kind of surpassed that in something you saw right at the end of the festival, after the festival was
But
actually your
two
favorite.
great movies, I think,
Yeah.
in any case, and 2 really great films directed by women. So, when these movies come out, will definitely remind you to check them out.
Mm-hmm. I will never forgive you that you didn't like The Humans as much as me, but it's okay.
Humans is fine. Humans. Where is The Humans on my list? I'm going to look this up quickly before we have.
This. I am actually quite.
The Licorice Pizza trailer just came out.
I know. Do you want to do a live reacts of it, or
we
what?
should do for a conversations?
Okay, let's do a conversations. We'll do a Licorice Pizza reaction, which is funny. Spider-Man and Licorice Pizza as our 2 trailer reactions.
Hell yeah.
It's okay. Wherever you put The Humans is fine. Again, that's why I love doing this show with you. Why I love TIFF is like, we have a lot of movies.
I still like The Humans, though.
I know you do. I know you do. You gave a lot of 3.5s this festival, which I think is
handing them out like
I don't mean that as I mean that as a good thing, of like, you saw a lot of movies you liked and
or
not necessarily
thought were good. Like overall, I would say, it's fun talking about Dear Evan Hansen, and there was a lot to kind of really get into, with Dune probably being our biggest disappointment during the festival.
Hey, and listen, I'm going to revisit Dune. I'm going to give it another shot now that I know exactly what it is. And I hope, guys, I know a lot of people were mad. I know a lot of people probably won't even listen to the show. They were just random people who clicked on our YouTube video. But like, I want to like Dune as much as some people are liking Dune. I can't help but, and Eric and I were on the exact same page of just being disappointed after we saw it. I hope when Dune Part 2, hopefully, please God, comes out, or
we've invested too much time at this point for it not to happen,
or when I give it a second shot knowing exactly what I'm getting. I
In the
hope
comfort of your own home.
I probably. Um
Well, when it comes out, when you get the screener,
yeah, at the end of
for
the
because
year
you're a
or
part of the
whatever.
Critics'
Yeah.
Choice group, right? So
So we'll see. I again, I do think it's the biggest disappointment, and then there's some other things that are just fine. Dear Evan Hansen just on another level of
I
bad.
mean, honestly, I think what would have broken into the top 5 would have been Malignant. If it
Honestly, no,
played.
dude. I will hypothetically right now, looking at this, Malignant would be number 3 for me above Spencer. I think. Um, if I'm
Gabriel
being
for the
honest.
win.
If I'm being completely honest, if I did see it at that Midnight Madness screening, even if it was unofficial, you know what? Peter kind of did it. I might throw it on this fucking list. I don't
Do
know.
it, man. Go for it.
Like people are gonna be like, didn't play the festival. I'll be like, well, Peter did do an unofficial Midnight Madness screening during the festival.
Well, it's
Um,
funny that you say, like, so for the our Bond conversation, which will be coming up this week,
on no, Tuesday, you
on
guys will get a
Tuesday,
well
yeah.
tomorrow. Oh no, Wednesday it will be up because we have to talk after this. That's outside of that. Yeah.
Right, right. But I this morning, Matt and I are going to be rewatching the Daniel Craig movie, so we'll talk about those films as well, in the context of that review. But I was also putting my ranking of all the Bond films together, and the
Of all
one,
of them or just the Craig ones?
all of them,
Oh wow, I would
all
love
of
to do
them.
that too, but I need to go back and rewatch a
I've
lot of them.
watched them so many times as a
See where I
kid that I
haven't.
just
Yeah.
remember them all, like, or
I
at least
can't wait to
parts
talk.
of
We'll
them.
talk about all this on No Time to Die because
But
I
the
was
reason
telling
why
you this.
I'm bringing this up is because, so with the inclusion of No Time to Die, this will be the 25th Bond movie. But unofficially,
There's the
there's
yeah
the Sean Connery 1983 Bond film, Never Say Never,
yeah.
which he is playing Bond, but they don't have the rights to the name Bond or any of the characters associated within the Bond mythology. So, you have a lot of these cast members and the world that's the same, and it is just a Bond movie. So I'm like, I'm not including that, but I could understand
You
someone
almost want to, yeah,
yeah, because it's actually not bad.
yeah.
I mean, for everybody that criticizes Connery maybe being too old for that movie, I mean, Roger Moore was Bond until 85, and at that time, like, like, it's almost like, come on, Roger, like,
I
you know
always considered Bond as an older guy. Like I don't know, like even after this, Daniel, we'll leave it for the No Time to Die thing because it will be his last one, and we can hypothesize where the franchise will go after. But I'm with you. I loved Bond as a kid. I remember buying a martini glass when I was really young and putting ginger ale and a grape in it and like to pretend I was drinking martinis because I love James Bond so much and I wanted to be James Bond. And we'll talk about all that on No Time to Die because, yeah, I'm excited to rewatch these Craig movies and then eventually go back because I have that Bond set and they're even available in 4K digitally. I don't know if
yeah,
a 4K set came out yet, a physical.
not yet. The Daniel Craig ones
But yeah.
but the Connery to Brosnan films and Lazenby and Dalton
Mhm.
in between, I don't think have been released
Physically
yet,
4K. They are
to my knowledge.
digitally, and
Yes.
I've been watching all the Craig ones in 4K, and oh man, I just watched Skyfall. It's gorgeous. I can't wait to talk about it all. But huge Bond guy. Yeah, check that out on Wednesday morning. Our review for No Time to Die will go up. So if you're listening to this, it might already be up there. So go check it out over on Untitled Movie Reviews. You can check out all those TIFF reviews we mentioned over on Untitled Movie Reviews. You guys can just a one-stop shop for everything Untitled. Head over to our Letterboxd HQ, which is Untitled_movies. You'll get links to all the conversations, all the reviews, all the podcasts, all our ratings, our lists. So I'll post both Eric and I's best of TIFF lists. I'll put Eric's Bond ranking up. I'll put my Daniel Craig ranking up because I need to go back and rewatch the other ones and things like that. So one-stop shop, Letterboxd HQ, Untitled_movies. Thank you all for listening or watching. As always, my name is Matt Rohrbeck. You can find more of my work around the internet, but mostly at UntitledMoviePodcast.com. And you can follow me on all those social medias at Matt Rohrbeck.
And I'm Eric Martian. You can find more of my video reviews at rogerstv.com/cinemascene and on the social medias at EM6211.
Until next time.
Here we go.
Love it.